Good morning. Thank you all for being here. It's nice to see a full house. It would really be nice if we had this for all our meetings. So I'm going to call to order the Corporate and Administrative Services Committee meeting for Thursday, January 31st. And I'd like to acknowledge that we are within the territory of the Sechelt First Nation. So we have an amended agenda in front of us. We also received another handout, another piece of correspondence this morning. So we're going to add that to the correspondence. Any other additions or deletions? Staff? No? Okay. So I'd look for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much. We have two delegations this morning. The first is Hope Keats with the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association. So I'll invite you to come forward. And you're using the projector, correct? Okay, so some of us will move out of the way so we don't get blinded and can actually see it. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hope Keats, and I'm the president of the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association. I would like to thank the SCRD board for providing an opportunity for the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association to address the issue of the possible extension of ice in our arenas on the Sunshine Coast. The extension of ice at the arenas would detrimentally impact the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association. The SCRD board adopted the Parks and Recreation Master Plan January 23, 2014. This master plan speaks of being grounded by a vision and mission statements that embrace a variety of recreational opportunities. Goals outlined include striving to strengthen the community fabric, facilitating a variety of recreational opportunities, and achieving environmental stewardship, contributing to a diverse and sustainable economy, and financial sustainability. The decision to maintain current dry floor and ice times demonstrates a commitment to the master plan as outlined in 2014. The Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association believes that changing or increasing ice time would have an environmental, social, and financial impact that would violate and disregard the defined collective vision for parks and recreation in the SCRD. The arena is a regional district facility. The board that represents our region needs to make decisions to support all its constituents, not a select few. Strategies need to be implemented that meet the needs of all users, not those that choose to make demands to support their own agendas at the high social cost of others. Witnessing potential animosity between user groups within a community is never easy. Let it be known that the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association has not initiated any requests at the expense of others in the community, nor have we verbally or written negatively about any other sport on the coast. We are simply being responsible in informing the board of our community at the high social cost to our membership regarding the issue at hand. The Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association was established in 2013. Registration numbers throughout the years have ranged between 33 to 150. Players range in ages between 8 and 16, both male and female. Teams have traveled in BC successfully representing the Sunshine Coast in tournaments and provincial competitions since the club onset. The Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association competes annually in divisional play April through July during box lacrosse season, traveling weekly to the Lower Mainland. The extension of ice into the lacrosse season will negatively impact the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse athletes and families. With no alternatives for box lacrosse, athletes lose opportunities to play Canada's national sport, experience multi-sport training, the ability to qualify for potential scholarships, while increasing environmental costs. There are no alternatives on the coast for substitutes venues for box lacrosse. The measurements and dimensions of the box are precisely what the arena provides in accordance with the rules and regulations of BCLA and Canada Lacrosse Association. Teams need change rooms, access to water, and a clean, dry playing surface with netting and walls. The sport of lacrosse offers its athletes a variety of scholarship opportunities. Current athletes and future athletes would be denied the opportunity to apply and qualify for these scholarships. They did not have a chance to further their skills and continue to excel at the sport of lacrosse. If actions and decisions to increase the ice team for other sport were to occur, it would deny lacrosse athletes the opportunity to further their education and the love of the sport. We at the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association fear that a decrease in the lacrosse season would detrimentally result in loss of enrollment, thereby denying our athletes scholarship opportunities. One of the SCRD's board goals for communities is to provide a variety of recreational opportunities and strengthen community fabric. The support of homogeneity of sport on the coast with increased ice time reflects a devaluing of diversity. Studies have shown that multi-sport registration is healthy and advantageous. The effects of multi-sport training are numerous. They keep kids interested in sports, keep kids healthy, decrease the rate of delinquency, prevent burnout and injury, all while providing athletes an opportunity to try new things and decide what recreational sport they really love. As you can see by the quote, even the great Wayne Gretzky was a big fan of lacrosse and has credited it for helping him become a better hockey player. A multi-sport registration encourages and strengthens community fabric by enabling athletes to grow as individuals, teammates, while maintaining support from others, including adults, within the community. With the increase of ice time, our lacrosse athletes will be forced to seek box clubs outside of the Sunshine Coast, which takes away from strengthening the community fabric. It also takes away our athletes' opportunity to represent the Sunshine Coast and their expression of hometown pride. Another aspect to consider with increasing ice time on the Sunshine Coast are the environmental costs. Dry floor affords time for maintenance of our facilities. Additional ice time may actually increase our carbon footprint, as maintaining ice during the hot summer months increases greenhouse gases created by our community. This goes against the SCRD goals of environmental stewardship. In accordance with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, financial sustainable economy and financial sustainability, which are among their goals for community sports, increasing ice times for other sports will remove the opportunity for lacrosse athletes to participate in their chosen sport. By denying athletes their proper season in the SCRD would be taking away the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association's ability to maintain any financial sustainability of our box lacrosse programs. I would like to now read our petition signed by our members of our association outlining 8 reasons why extended ice time would be detrimental to the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association. We, the undersigned members of the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association, would officially like to register our objection to the idea of having ice time at one of our SCRD rinks extended to 10 months. We believe that diversity in sport is important for our athletes on the coast. Decreased dry floor time means prioritizing the needs of skaters and hockey players during their off-season over the needs of box lacrosse players during their regular season of play. Not to mention the detrimental impact decreased dry floor time will have on pickleball and roller derby associations. Any decision that supports increased ice time during skating and hockey off-seasons over other sports during the regular season demonstrates a lack of commitment to the diversity in sport. 2. Compared to hockey and ice skating, box lacrosse has a short season. Practices started in March. Seasonal play goes from April-June, with BC Games and other playoffs happening in July. If we don't have enough dry floor time during these months, it could cripple us as an organization. If the ice time is extended in Seashell Arena, that means our players further up the coast will need to travel further on a regular basis for regular practices and games. For example, a family with 2 players under the age of 12 will have to keep driving from Madeira Park to Gibson's 3 times a week to participate in a sport they love. We worry that the inconvenience and time involved would prevent young players from joining up. 4. If there is increased time awarded in Gibson's, that would mean increased travel time for visiting teams. To compete in divisional play, they would need to add the drive to Seashell to the existing ferry time to come to the coast and compete with our athletes. Lower mainland teams already find it difficult coming to the Sunshine Coast and are likely to resent this and possibly bail on the games entirely. 5. If lacrosse registration numbers get any lower, our Sunshine Coast lacrosse players would need to play for teams on the lower mainland. Those late ferry rides midweek are very challenging for children and teenagers who have school the early morning. Six, we respect the desire for growth and improvement, but not at the expense of others. What we envision is an ongoing commitment to diversity, supporting a healthy community for both the majority and the minority. Shifting resources to a majority group at the expense of the minority diminishes us as a community. We would like to see and feel supported by the SCRD in helping us promote the sport of lacrosse, Canada's national summer sport, here on the coast. We can offer the equipment, personnel, and coaching to do so, but we need the support of the SCRD to help this great sport thrive on the coast. We offer affiliation with BCLA, LMMLC, and the NLL. These organizations are deeply invested in promoting the sport of lacrosse, supporting the health and development of communities and individuals of all ages through recreation and sport. Canada is an international leader in the sport of lacrosse and is in fact about to defend its world title again at the World Lacrosse Championships, which are taking place in Vancouver. But we need more support at the community level to do our part in ensuring that the sport continues to thrive locally. We would like to be able to contribute to the base of the programs that makes this happen. In closing, the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association looks forward to the future, the continuing partnership with the SCRD, and to the consistent mission of embracing a variety of recreational opportunities to all athletes and their families. We appreciate the SCRD's continued approach of striving to strengthen community fabric while facilitating a variety of recreational opportunities, achieving environmental stewardship, and contributing to a diverse and sustainable economy and financial sustainability. Together, we can contribute to providing diversity in recreational sport opportunities, health and wellness of our athletes, cohesion of a community in a responsible and respectful manner. On behalf of the Sunshine Coast Lacrosse Association, I thank you all for your attention and for providing an opportunity to express our concerns of how the increase of ice times will detrimentally impact the sport of lacrosse in our community. Are there any questions?
Excuse me, we're not taking questions from the gallery, thank you. Questions from directors? Any questions on the presentation? Director Pratt?
How many in total do you have in the lacrosse league right now registered?
Registration has opened about 2 weeks ago, and early bird fees are in effect until February 28th. We don't usually know how many are going to be registered until the end of our registration season, and it closes. So it's, I don't really know at this point because registration is ongoing.
Okay.
But I can tell you that this process has potentially caused some disruption in the community as to the viability and is influencing our membership.
How many registrants did you have last year?
We had 33. It was, in years past, that's below the average. In years past, it has been over 100 since 2003.
Yes. And once again, the season for lacrosse?
It begins in April. The season officially opens April 8th this year. It is great if you can actually practice before the beginning of your season. It's advantageous. And then, like I mentioned, the provincials go into the end of July. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So now this is I don't know a lot about lacrosse because even though it is our national sport, so I think it's probably there's a lot of us that because it wasn't offered to us as kids. But one of the now, you had said that there's box lacrosse, which is what the leagues are right now, and it's just similar to the professional team that's in Vancouver right now.
That's right, the Warriors.
Yes, and so that's very specific, I'm assuming, because you have a
contained surface.
Yeah, you have a same surface rather than in some cases there is grass lacrosse that's played outside.
They're two different seasons, and although they're sister sports, you're right. The venues are played different. Field lacrosse is ending now. Provincials are actually happening in Nanaimo. It's starting. The end of field lacrosse is starting. Okay.
Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. So So we have two different kinds of lacrosse, then there's a field lacrosse and box lacrosse?
That's correct.
Okay.
2 different seasons.
And the Canadian national summer sport are they the same, or I'm hearing national sport?
Both of them are.
Both of them?
Yeah, lacrosse in general is Canadian's national support. Or its history actually branches into the Indigenous. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's and it has been in existence since the 1800s.
Long time.
Yeah, quite a long time. They would use rawhide and actual sticks, and they would actually they would use it as a way to get ready for to keep their warriors fit. So it branches, way even like during colonial days is the history of it.
I'm interested in the kind of why a person would choose to enroll in lacrosse versus other in this multi-sport diversity and lacrosse training. So Wayne Gretzky, did he play lacrosse?
Yes, he did.
He played lacrosse.
He played. I think he played box lacrosse.
Okay.
After the regular season.
So a lacrosse player will probably play other sports as well.
We've got a few hockey players that do play lacrosse, and they love it. Yeah, it's a really nice mesh between the sports. Just the different the eye-hand coordination and the way they move. Both playing both sports really complements each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're moving this thing through space, a puck or a ball. That's kind of what you do.
There's like a demonstration of a stick there, and there's a rather hard ball that goes into that stick, and you pass it back and forth. It's 5-on-5, and then there's a goalie.
So there's a strong relationship between hockey and lacrosse then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lacrosse and basketball as well, because it's 5-on-5. Yeah, similar types of, you can't step into the crease. There's only certain ways that you can check. And you need to, in box, you need to shoot within 30 seconds of having possession of the ball. Yeah, It's very fast-paced and it's exciting, fun.
So what draws people to lacrosse, you think, as a parent to register their kid there? What draws them to that?
Just the learning to become a team member,
sports, yeah.
Team sports, leadership. Teaching others about lacrosse. Eye-hand coordination. Living a balanced life, being physically active, managing situations like.
Decision making.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Beamish?
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Can you remind me two things? What are the ages of the people involved in the lacrosse?
Well, we start from tyke, mini tyke, and those age divisions, they're 8, 9, 10, and then it goes all the way up into grade 11. They actually age out and just before graduating from high school, and then if they want to continue, they then need to play in an intermediate, which we don't offer here.
Okay.
But it's primarily from ages 8 to 9 all the way up to 15.
About 8 to 15 or 8 to 16.
Yeah,
sort of thing?
yeah.
And again, your start and finish dates for your season normally?
The season officially opens April 8th. Divisional play usually begins the weekend after we start. We practice and then we prepare to receive teams from Vancouver. They come last year they came every Sunday. Historically, they've come every Saturday to play, and then they do tiering according to how well we perform. And there's A, B, and C divisions. And then we have a tiering break for one weekend, and then according to that and how well we've performed, we get shuffled into the teams that we compete against in the Lower Mainland. The Coquitlam is extremely strong. New West, they have a rich heritage in lacrosse.
And there's regular travel then from Gibson's or Sunshine Coast to the Lower Mainland for the tournaments.
Right. We go to Delta, Chilliwack.
And how many tournaments we hold here in Sunshine Coast?
We would love to have to be able to host a tournament here, but we have not yet.
Haven't yet done that, okay.
But it would be exceptional if we could. The salmon ballets from New West, they have tournaments there for our novice. We've gone and competed there. Also, in the Minoru Arena in Richmond, we've competed there as well.
And how are our teams doing?
We've done really well.
Good.
Yeah.
So April the 8th is kind of the start time frame. What's the end time frame for the season?
The end of the season is July, end of July.
End of July.
Yeah,
Okay.
divisional play usually wraps up by the beginning of July, and then it's the provincials in the end of July,
Okay.
beginning of August.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, directors? Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. While we wait for our next delegation to come up and get settled, what I'd like to do is entertain a motion to receive all the correspondence, including the correspondence we received this morning of the presentation. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And we have Ian Overend and Terry Carleen. Are you both presenting, gentlemen, or just Ian? Okay. Now we have a whole bunch of people. We have a whole bunch of people standing outside the door. If you all would just kind of move in a bit, maybe they can hear what's going on, because we'll be getting into discussion after this. So let everybody move into the room.
That's great.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, over to you.
Well, good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, directors, and staff. My name is Ian Overend. I reside at 6041 Coracle Place in Sandy Hook. I'm here this morning representing the Sunshine Coast Pickleball Association, of which I am a director. I am joined by Terry Carleen, who is also a director of our club. Our purpose here today is to present to you our position on the subject of the scheduling of ice times versus dry floor times at the two SCRD arenas. You heard the position of the Sunshine Coast Skate Club on November 22nd in a presentation by Andrea Watson. Although that presentation contains several statements which we consider exaggerated, misleading, or factually questionable. I have written a rebuttal to the arguments in the Skate Club's presentation, which I have provided to the SCRD staff, so I will not go into that today. Rather, I would like to introduce you to the people on the coast who love the game of pickleball and the association which supports them, and then present our views on our arena scheduling. Who we are. The SCPA is a registered nonprofit society established in May of 2015 to promote, organize, and facilitate the sport of pickleball on the Sunshine Coast. We currently have 181 dues-paid members for the 2018-19 season, representing the majority of active pickleball players on the coast. We have a 12-member board of directors who work year-round on such things as player development, our annual in-house tournament, coaching, player ratings, membership, and the organization and scheduling of venues on the coast to play the game. We have a very professional and complete website, sunshinecoastpickleball.com, to inform our members and potential members of our activities. Our members are also belong to PCO, the Pickleball Canada organization, which is the national sanctioning body. Our sport. Pickleball, sometimes called the greatest game with the silliest name, is one of the fastest growing sports in North America and is certainly number one among the 60-plus demographic. The benefits to older Sunshine Coasters in terms of physical well-being, socialization, and an active lifestyle are undisputed and can be attested to by our members, many of whom are in their 70s and a few who are still playing pickleball in their 80s. Our club has recently been exploring avenues for what we are calling youth outreach, since pickleball has been attracting new players in younger demographics, and we see that as the future of our sport. The benefits to young people in terms of physical fitness, socialization, learning fair play, skills development, and commitment are tremendous. The game is easy to learn but difficult to master. The number of injuries is very low, and the cost is extremely low for the number of hours of enjoyment the game provides. The cost to families to enroll their children in a pickleball program would be a very small fraction of the cost to play almost any other sport, especially ice-related sports. What we do for the SCRD. The SCPA, pardon me. The SCPA has been managing the SCRD summer pickleball program during the dry floor period at the two arenas for the last 5 years at no cost to the SCRD. Our volunteer members publish the schedule, sign up players, organize levels of play, set up and take down the nets, and run every other aspect of the program. All the SCRD staff has to do is open the doors and collect the money. About the only thing that indicates that pickleball is an SCRD program is that the Recreation Department's MyPass can be used to pay the drop-in fee. Our association works very hard to fulfill our mandate to promote pickleball on the Sunshine Coast, as well as the stated goals of the SCRD in providing services for all generations per the SCRD vision statement. Pickleball in the winter. Although pickleball is considered a year-round sport, during the winter months when there is ice on arena floors, there is no SCRD pickleball program at all. We have had to privately rent the gymnasiums in 3 school District 46 elementary schools, fragmenting our program so that our entire membership never gets to play together. The gyms barely provide enough room for the 3 courts, and their dimensions are too small for the courts to be the proper length. During the Christmas holidays, spring break, professional development days, the schools are closed and the gyms are not accessible. There are times during the winter when there are no public pickleball courts or suitable gyms anywhere in the SCRD that are available to us. The SCPA membership, however, believes in the spirit of fairness and sharing, so we make these compromises in order to facilitate the use of the arenas by the ice user groups during the appropriate season for their sports. The opposition. There are 2 groups on the Sunshine Coast, the Skate Club and the Minor Hockey Association, which have requested repeatedly that the SCRD allocate the Seashelt and Gibson's arenas to their sports for at least 10 months of the year. At a recent meeting of all arena user groups convened by SCRD staff, most other ice user groups expressed satisfaction with their allotment of time, but these 2 groups asked for more. Aside from the substantial practical considerations concerning budget, water consumption, and maintenance, this proposal is inconsistent with the SCRD's stated values of collaboration, equity, environmental leadership, respect, equality, and transparency. The SCPA goes to great lengths to keep our club functioning in other venues during the winter months because we realize that ice sports are a big part of the Canadian winter, and we support the ice-related groups who need the arenas. We feel that it is only fair that during the winter sports season, the arenas should be allocated to the ice users. But we expect to be treated with the same respect and sense of fairness during the summer when it is appropriate to have the arenas allocated to pickleball, lacrosse, roller derby, and special events. Please keep in mind that the sign above the door says multi-sport facility, not ice rink or hockey arena. We do not wish to disparage the people who want more ice time, but we find ourselves forced into the uncomfortable position of having to defend our right to use a publicly funded facility against a group who are relentlessly aggressive in their annual attempts to promote their own narrow agenda. We play fair with them, but we are not given the same respect in return. The future. Every year for the past 10 years, the Skate Club and Minor Hockey Group have been aggressively pushing for summer ice. In the spirit of fairness, their request has been heard, and the valuable time of this committee, SCRD staff, and the opposing dry floor user groups has been spent examining the merits of their proposal. Every year, the outcome has been the same. Their request has been turned down. Madam Chair and Directors, I respectfully submit that it is time to stop repeating this time-consuming, costly, and divisive cycle. Until such times as there are sufficient venues in the SCRD to permit the dry floor user groups to pursue their sport elsewhere, please rule in favor of establishing the fact that the arenas must be shared. When there are purpose-built when there are purpose-built pickleball courts or a shared community gymnasium, we will be happy to support the summer ice proposal. Until then, please establish a permanent allotment of arena time which is fair, dependable, and fiscally responsible, and save us all from having to repeat this unhelpful and costly exercise every year. The irony is not lost on us that we must appeal to the SCRD to defend an SCRD program in an SCRD multi-sport facility against a hostile adversary who wants to take away our right to equitably share that venue with them according to the SCRD's own stated values. Madam Chair and Directors, thank you all for your time.
Thank you. First, before I go to directors with questions, I did go through your presentation here. I just want to note that one of the pages is duplicated and one of the pages seems to be missing. So you might want to look at your presentation and submit
Okay.
the complete thing for the record. Okay.
You bet.
And then questions from directors. Director Rowe.
Thank you for your presentation. And this is really more just a comment than a question. There's a lot of language in that report that felt pretty assertive to me. And you've stated in the last paragraph that minor hockey and the skate club has been aggressively pushing for summer ice. I would suggest really to everyone that you look at that through the lens of parents and volunteers that are advocating for their children based on how, the Government of Canada's long-term athlete development model. Mm-hmm. And so I really, this is such an issue that brings up a lot of conversation, but I really want people to be on guard of the language that we're using.
Okay.
And I also want to...
This is not...
Hang on. No.
Excuse me. We don't need that. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. My other point is that, just speaking from the other side for one moment, and then I will recuse myself from this discussion further, is that we have minor hockey and skate club hasn't always been denied extended ice. So if we need to have a conversation, it needs to involve facts. We have had ice till April 30th before, and there has been ice from August 1st. So okay. I'm happy to have a conversation, but I just want to be factual.
The only time the ice was extended was due to the water shortage and the drought, because there wasn't enough time. That was last year, and our club suffered because of it, because the time was not what we normally get, so we lost membership. People had to find somewhere else to play. But this is not about our sports. This is about the fair and equitable use of public facilities. We didn't choose this fight. It's brought to us every year. We have to defend our right to play in an SCRD arena. Why should we do that?
Okay, thank you, Ian. Any other questions from directors? Director Pratt?
Thank you for your presentation. I see in your presentation that you do note that you have used school district facilities before, but they're not large enough. It's not optimal because of the size and not being able to have all of the teams at the same time. And then I wanted to ask about the cost that you indicate, because the SCRD does have a joint use agreement with the school district, and this may have to go to staff to reduce costs for for our programs and user groups to use school district facilities. And that's so because those are community facilities, and we all essentially have the same community. I'm wondering if the Pickleball Association has investigated that further with SDRD staff.
I'm going to go to staff with that first and to see whether or not they've followed up with the school district on this.
Thank you, Chair Seegers. In 2018, pickleball programs offered by SCRD were delivered through the joint use program or joint use agreement and made use of the cost-saving opportunities of that agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any further to add, Ian?
Yeah, the schools are closed all summer. We don't have any access to the schools in the summer. We don't have access during the Christmas holidays, during spring break. Every time there's a professional development day, we're canceled. So the schools are not suitable.
Okay. Director Pratt?
I think if we get into that a little bit further, and I'm going to say this, having been very recently a school board trustee who is a huge proponent of the joint use agreement, that I think that might be something that we can look at through the two organizations. It will just to help with during those closure times, because these are still facilities, and if they're not being utilized by students in school at that time, the purpose of the joint use agreement is to help out. I'm not saying it's an optimal solution for your organization, but I'm just saying it might be a bit of a stopgap in some of those times. Because we are one community and we do need to work together, and the one thing we want is everybody to work together to find a solution. We want to be solutions based, not adversarial with one another. So we really want to work towards a solution between all the user groups so that everybody is feeling that they are getting fair and equitable use of our facilities that our people are paying for.
Thank you. Director McBown, did you have a question? Did you have your hand up? No? Okay. Director Beamish.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I noticed in two spots in your presentation you talk about, well, first of all, you start off when you speak about the Pickleball Association and its organization, but then you talk about on the third page that I have on a number of pages here, at the top you talk about you're defending the SCRD's own pickleball programs.
Yes.
And then you conclude with also saying that appeal to the SCRD to defend an SCRD program. Is this an SCRD program, or is it SCRD facilitating the Pickleball Association in a program?
It's an SCRD program. It's listed in the Recreation Guide.
Okay, so there's something that the SCRD started, is it? Pickleball? Sorry? To staff?
I'm going to go to staff. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Seegers. So there is an SCRD delivered pickleball program, which the delegation spoke about, that was initiated as part of growing activity in arenas in alignment with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. As well, staff are aware that various pickleball groups rent facilities and organize other events and programs in our facilities and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also,
One more question.
use of tennis courts. The tennis court that's across from my house is frequently used in the summertime by both pickleballers and tennis courts. And I think that happens in Laura Gibson's as well, pickleball players. So there are other facilities in the outdoors. I know tennis has started now outside, but I haven't seen pickleball there yet. Is it?
Well, in Seashelt, there are 2 courts in Hackett Park that are lined for pickleball.
Yeah.
The surfaces are very rough. They're tennis nets, so they're too high for us. There are other outdoor venues, but the arenas give us 9 courts. The most we can get outdoors is 2.
Yeah.
How can we run a club with 2 courts?
Yeah, I don't know. One of scheduling, I guess, but it's yeah. Okay, thank you.
Director Tighe, sorry. Blank.
Thanks for your presentation, and I guess my question got partially answered by Director Beamish here, and that's that you can play pickleball outdoors, And my question is you know, I think it would probably be much more cost-friendly and probably be something that, or not too expensive to create an outdoor box lacrosse rink that would then also be able to be used by pickleballers.
That would be great. If you can build us someplace where we can play pickleball outdoors,
Yeah.
purpose-built pickleball courts, we would be thrilled.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of clarify whether that would be something that you'd be interested in. Yeah.
Well, suggesting that we should go somewhere else is avoiding the issue. This isn't about whether we should go somewhere else or hockey should go somewhere else. It's about sharing. It's about equality, equity, and fairness. It's about us being able to use the arena in the summer. It's a summertime sport, and hockey gets it in the winter. That's the way it's always been. Why are we looking at changing it? It works. Everybody gets to play. Everybody gets to share. These are publicly funded facilities. Why should we be shut out?
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, to comment on that, you know, there's the equitable sharing, but the problem is that ice sports, the only place where they can do ice sports is in an ice arena, whereas every other sport has other opportunities to go and play their sport. That being said, I do see that there's a shortage of venues for pickleball and lacrosse, box lacrosse outside of these arenas. So I think that we should be looking into creating those venues so that we all have equitable use of it. But
build
you know,
a community gym.
Yeah,
We'd
and
be thrilled.
yeah, so that's so I think I hear you, but ice sports need to be done on ice, and their community is growing as well. So yeah.
Then if you don't allow us to have ice or dry floor time, you're damaging the home show, the quilt show, pickleball, and lacrosse. So that hockey and ice skaters can use the arenas. Is that fair?
Well,
Thank you. That's a conversation I think we'll be having as a board up here. Okay. Any other questions from directors? Director Beamish.
If the ice was covered with a hard surface from time to time, can pickleball be played on that hard cover?
It would depend on how smooth that was.
Yeah.
If the ball hits a joint between two pieces of the portable flooring, it can go off in any direction.
Right.
Could you play
Hey,
tennis?
great more challenge.
Yeah, a whole lot.
That's right. Yeah.
Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I'm going to follow the theme of the alternative surfaces. So there's something about the surface that is inherent in pickleball, which is different than tennis, or is there?
No, it's very similar to a tennis. You can put 4 pickleball courts in the same floor area as one tennis court. Pickleball or tennis courts are being converted all over North America to pickleball because tennis is on the decline and pickleball is on the increase. So we've approached the tennis club here about using their facilities, sharing with them, becoming associate members. We're trying all sorts of things to get in there, and so far we've been unsuccessful.
So the parkland tennis courts, the surface is a suitable surface, or it's not a suitable surface?
They're asphalt. You know, it's less than ideal. It can be done, but a purpose-built pickleball surface is a very fine type of composite material, so that it reduces injuries. Pickleball has far fewer injuries than tennis because you're not doing as much of that stop and go side to side. It's easier on the knees. But on the asphalt surfaces, injuries increase dramatically. A smooth surface is ideal. It doesn't have to be as smooth as a gymnasium for outdoor play, at least, but it has to be a purpose-built floor for a sport using a ball.
So is there a standard, like a national pickleball standard surface that is required for like tournament type of things, or?
Most tournaments are played on purpose-built pickleball courts. We have a tournament. There are tournaments all over the Lower Mainland that are played in hockey arenas in the summer. And we would be thrilled if there was somewhere else to play, but there isn't.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, directors? Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask Director Rowe to leave the room. Yeah. Thank you. You'll probably go in the Cedar room next door. Yeah. Okay. All right, directors, first let's receive all the reports. Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And for the cost-benefit analysis for year-round ice, I'm going to turn over to Director Ian Hall. Thank you. GM, sorry. You probably like your title better than ours.
Thank you, Chair.
Or you've been demoted, is what he said.
Staff have prepared a report on the implications of maintaining year-round ice in one SCRD facility. The report examines costs and benefits using a framework that includes social impacts, revenue impacts, operating costs, including water and energy, and capital impacts. Some facility considerations, including refrigeration capacity, are described, concluding that the Gibsons and Area Community Centre is currently much more suitable than the Sunshine Coast Arena for warm weather ice delivery. Analysis of operating seasons is provided, concluding that maintaining year-round ice in one facility with main regular season ice in the other requires a 28% increase in ice days delivered by SCRD. Policy, informed by demographics, sport trends and needs, and community desires, informs how facilities have been operated in the past and currently. A key point noted in the report, and which staff would like to highlight, is that year-round ice, or even sustained summer ice, has never been offered in either of the SCRD's arenas. The implications of this are both technical, in terms of how ice plants can be operated and what impacts might result, and social. Year-round ice would be a change for all user groups, as well as for staff operating and maintaining facilities. In providing this report, staff are sensitive to the investments of time, energy, passion, and money made by all sport groups and event planners. And it's with respect for these efforts that options and opportunities are noted in the report. So looking specifically at the analysis that's in the report summarizes some of the social impacts anticipated for arena users. This analysis was informed in part by a roundtable dialogue held in November of 2018 and attended by most of the user groups. There are some opportunities, and there are also some constraints to rescheduling dry floor activities and moving dry floor activities from one SCRD facility to another, or from an SCRD facility to a School District 46 facility through the joint use function. Some ICE users would see social benefits in terms of sport development opportunities. Revenue impacts were assessed, with particular attention to spring 2019 as an example case. Rental fees, as currently set in Bylaw 599.7, were applied. And based on allocation requests gathered in the last couple of weeks, April weekly average revenue, if all booking requests are confirmed, is $7,136. In May, for the information of the committee, the weekly average is $3,132. And staff note that at the current time, all of these bookings are not confirmed. And as well, as noted in the report, some dry floor revenue may be foregone. Operating costs differ between ice and dry floor seasons. Materials and supplies, utilities, and staffing costs are higher, incrementally higher for ice by about $4,500 a week. The most significant single cost in delivering ice is capital impact. Increasing service hours on ice plants will have a resulting impact on lifespan and capital replacement costs, calculated at $2,885 per week. So in summary, financially, the incremental cost to deliver ice is estimated at $7,435 per week. Based on spring 2019 allocation requests, this means that April variable costs would be very close to being fully covered if all bookings proceed, which does require commitments from all users, including acceptance of the one facility offered, which may or may not be the preferred facility in some cases. While acknowledging that planning lead time and establishing an annual routine is required by sport organizations to maximize the potential of programs and events, staff estimate that an annual operating gap of $45,000 to $65,000 is likely, covering the months of May through August. And this figure takes into consideration May requests received this year, the high-level expressions of interest in summer ice that were received during the November stakeholder dialogue, the details of the materials provided by the Sunshine Coast Skate Club, which indicate desire for 10 or 11 months of ice, and the figure assumes growth of user group activity based on lead time to plan and consistent annual scheduling that would allow for the development of new programming and growth in membership. Finally, a series of implementation considerations are provided on page 16 of the agenda package. A key consideration is that should a change in facility operation be directed, having lead time for planning is likely to have benefits not only for user groups but also for SCRD. And while work on this report has been undertaken, staff have been working with and in dialogue with user groups through our usual spring and summer allocation process to ensure continuity of planning for all parties. The report provides the best information that staff are able to gather with respect to the implications and costs and benefits. And in terms of timing and next steps, staff comment that if the committee intends to form recommendations based on the information provided, such recommendations and board direction would be used to confirm schedules as early as mid-March through August, the period that is currently being allocated per our normal practice. And for example, currently ICE is planned to be in Gibson's and Area Community Centre until March 17th, with a potential ICE extension following our normal policies and procedures in the Sunshine Coast Arena, if incremental costs are covered. However, a board decision to move toward year-round ICE might dictate, practically, that ICE is removed in the Sunshine Coast Arena on March 17th, with ICE remaining at GAC. Staff have committed to communicate with user groups about spring schedules as soon as possible, including providing an update following today's meeting, in keeping with the processes set out in the regional district's current policy and procedures. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the pieces that sticks out for me in all of this, and I think it's reflected in the room here, is that lead time is important for all organizations. So I would like to see the directors, if they're interested in pursuing this, to look at this year and next year, so that we give some certainty to all the organizations that are dealing with this. So I'm going to turn it over to directors for discussion. Director Ties.
Well, my question is, and it might not be able to be answered by those here, is this year, giving the short lead time, there's a considerable shortfall in funding for if we were to keep summer ice. But my question is, next year, how much more ice-related business could we attract to the coast as a result of having year-round ice, like summer tournaments and that kind of stuff? And so having that commitment to summer ice would mean that that would actually get some kind of commitment going. So that's something that we should maybe keep in mind, is that if we do commit to summer ice, that in the end we might actually not have as much of a shortfall as we would this year.
Okay, any other directors?
She might have an answer.
Would you like to answer that question? I would love to answer that question. Could you come up to the mic, please? Then it's actually recorded on our tape.
for the opportunity to answer a very important question.
And could you just state your name, too?
Sure.
Please?
My name is Kate Turner. I'm the registrar for the Sunshine Coast Minor Hockey Association as well as the Sunshine Coast Skating Club, so I can answer that on behalf of both organizations. Planning for our programming is detrimental to the success of our programs. I have a major part in programming for both organizations, and yes, time is of the essence when we're planning for seasons. We feel very confident in our programming for this spring as well as August for both organizations. Over the past 2 years, we have run several successful hockey camps and attracting professional coaches from the Lower Mainland with NHL status, as well as spring programming through the skate club and a very successful 3-on-3 league last year through minor hockey. We hope to grow those programs, and with enough time, we will be able to do so. I'd also like to note that included in that financial report from the SCRD is no SCRD programming for this spring. That's very important. One Goal is a very successful hockey initiative, and we have expressed, one of our minor hockey coaches is the coach of One Goal, and he has already expressed his interest in running a One Goal for this spring. So some of those financial dollars do not equate to any loss if we include SCRD programming, public skates, One Goal, and the possibility of expansion on things like adult learn to skate programs and adult power skating programs, programming that we are not able to offer during our regular season.
Thank you. Any other questions from directors? Director Hiltz?
Yeah, I think this is a question for staff. I'm kind of trying to sum up the report, kind of that in terms of the risks associated with making decisions, that changing allocation causes risk for an organization, which extends out to the long-term use of the facility in terms of the asset management, which is difficult to kind of. Do we have a good handle on how the change of use would affect the long-term sustainability of the facilities? Is that?
Staff? I think you're looking at capital. How does the capital amortization, basically, or the depreciation?
In order to be able to maintain a facility into future, we need sustainable funding, and when all the assumptions in the past have been of a certain amount of use,
yes,
we increase the use. How does that change, and how much of a good handle is on that?
Okay, thank you. Staff?
Thank you, Chair Seegers. The staff have a good grasp of the capital impacts because there's a detailed 20-year capital plan for the maintenance of recreation facilities, and that's reflected on today's agenda with an update to that. My comment about risk in the introduction that staff provided was related to the effects of operating a facility in warm weather when that hasn't happened in the past. So considerations such as indoor air quality and the ability to tune the operation of the plant to maintain high quality ice represents something that will need to be investigated and monitored if that situation occurs. Thanks.
Director Hiltz?
A follow-up. So we're entering uncharted territory of operating this facility in an area that we haven't done before.
Staff?
Thank you, Chair Seegers. Yes, that's true. The Gibsons and Area Community Centre was designed with the capacity to be operated 12 months of the year, and technically staff are confident that it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Beamish?
Question to staff is, I note in the report you did look at one point at acquiring into the dry floor covering for ice. What was the cost of that, and what is the implications of having that during the manpower?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair. The concept of a temporary floor was included in a previous analysis provided in, I believe, 2014 or 2016. And At that time, the cost was several hundreds of thousands of dollars and required some additional staffing and a forklift and storage as well. Thank you.
Director Beamish?
And not to be overlooked in this whole process is it's wonderful to have a room full of people lobbying for athletics, for recreation, youth, and seniors. I mean, what a great problem to have in the one sense in the community, because that's really what we want to have is positive activities in the community. I have some sympathy for programs where we start a program but we can't fulfill a full commitment to that program during the year, and we're forcing people to go off coast to continue as we take the ice out in one sense. And I have to admit that bias. I don't have any kids involved in ice sports or anything else like that. My kids were in figure skating at one time for about a month, I think, but they didn't do well. But it is one of those things that I think that we need to, as a community, find that balance. And 15 years ago, we didn't have that option. We only had the one ice arena on the coast. Now we have 2 arenas, and they're as fully booked as we can make them. But we have to also look at where we're having the balance of our time. We have outdoor venues that can be used by some groups and to fill in space. We have schools that need to be better utilized, obviously, and we need to better utilize our indoor facilities. And we may be looking at the future as to whether we need to get other facilities, such as a lacrosse box, if that's a growing sport. There will always be growing sports, and there'll be another one come along. Broomball used to be a popular sport as well, so that we need to look at all these opportunities. And I thank you all for coming out, and I thank you all for your passion for the sport and for the people who are members of your organizations. Thank you.
Director Ties?
Yeah, I have a question to staff of whether a feasibility study has ever been done to create an outdoor box lacrosse rink that could also be used by pickleballers.
And staff?
Thank you, Chair. No such study's been undertaken.
Okay, I'm going to make a comment here first, and then I'll pass it over to Director McMahon. I think we can look at Hackett Park and pass it over to our Parks Department in Sechelt and see what we can do about dealing with that rough surface there. Tennis club use, I'm also in communication with the tennis club, and there has been some talk of expansion there, so just kind of put that out there. As well, the district has land up by the tennis club, so I'm just going to throw that into the mix. So that's a potential as well. And then I agree as well. We should look at another facility for some of the dry floor surfaces that are required. So I think that's another conversation. Director McMahon.
Okay, I haven't been weighing in a whole lot on this because I am not an organized sports person. I'm a big fan of disorganized sports, which is what I do. And I agree that we need some sort of consistent schedule for at least the next 2 years, because it's not fair for anybody to leave this in a state of continual chaos. That said, we also need a strategy to get to zero emissions recreation on the coast. We haven't even looked at it yet. It's a big issue. We have a climate change emergency on our hands, and we need to figure out how to retool so that we are environmentally responsible, and we haven't gone there yet. I also wanted to speak up for another dry floor user that I'm surprised did not weigh in on this, which is the Home and Garden Show, which is the largest indoor event held on the coast with like 3,000 people coming to it, and it has a big economic impact on our community. Like some of these other groups do too with the tournaments. So there are spin-off economic effects from many of the groups that use the facilities. It seems that it's clearly not an option to run the Sechelt Arena in the summertime. So we are down to talking about what is going to be the length of time we'll leave ice in Gibsons, if I'm correct about this. And perhaps we should, I really don't know how we take this forward. I'm going to throw that back to the chair.
Okay, Okay, any other questions or comments before we look to see? Sorry, we're not going to take questions from the gallery. Anything else from directors? Director Tice.
Okay, I've got a little motion prepared, and I agree with Director McMahon that we need to provide some certainty to reduce the animosity between the groups, and I think that's the prime objective here. And my motion is that ice be guaranteed from September 1st, or whenever water restrictions permit, to May 31st on one ice surface. And here's my rationale. Why until May? Well, first of all, it brings us in line with other communities that have facilities like Powell River and Squamish and the North Shore. It's also the only place skaters can do their sport is on ice, and their membership is growing. And the reasons I have for declining year-round ice are primarily the water shortage. I think, if we're going to talk the talk, we need to walk the walk. And until we have more water resourced, then we need to be able to conserve as much as we can during the summer season. There's also the costs, the energy consumption, and the other users to think about. And I think that in connection with that, the staff should also do a feasibility study to create an outdoor box lacrosse rink that can also be used by pickleballers. So that's my motion.
Okay, and do you want that, can we do that as two separate motions?
Yeah, we can do that as two separate motions.
So currently you're suggesting that for this year, for 2019, we keep ice in till the end of May and then start with ice again September 1st?
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion?
Just clarify, is that one facility?
Yes, at one facility.
One facility.
Yeah.
And that's for 2019.
I would second that.
Director Beamish? Okay, any discussion by committee? Okay, I'm good. Any comment from staff first, and then we'll come back? No, you don't have to comment. Yes, Tina.
If I could, Chair, I'd like to comment on the second part of the motion regarding the feasibility. So once we're ready
going to do that.
proceed with
separate.
that one,
Thank you.
staff
Okay.
would like to comment.
Yes, Director McMahon?
I'm just wondering if we should leave a little wiggle room in here, because there's constraints about taking ice in and taking ice out, and they may have to move the dates a bit to accommodate.
Comment from staff on that? Would there be an issue if this year we kept ice in till the end of May and started at the beginning of September? Do you see any issues with doing that?
Thank you, Chair. Practically speaking, staff would comment that because of the next item on the committee's agenda, chiller replacement at Sunshine Coast Arena, keeping ice until the end of May, if that was the direction provided to staff, would effectively mean that that ice would be in Gibson's to enable the capital project to proceed at Sunshine Coast Arena, if that also forms board direction. And other considerations would be events in May, the quilt show being a substantial event in May that would need to be relocated, and the Home and Garden Show June 7th and 8th at Gibson's would require dry floor to be ready for those dates, or perhaps even the day before, and ice removal typically takes about a week. So it's possible that May 30th or May 29th might be the practically available last day of ice. Thank you.
Okay, we're just going to look at a calendar and see what that looks like.
The last weekend ends May 26th. So
That's the Saturday or Sunday?
That's the Sunday.
The Sunday, May 26th?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to amend your motion?
Yeah, should we do it for May 26th?
That would facilitate that for staff. And who seconded that motion? Would you agree to that? Okay. May 26th. We're doing this a little differently. Okay, so that's for this year, May 26th. Ice till May 26th, starting up again September 1st, 2019. Any other comments from, yes, Director McMahon?
Perhaps we could ask staff to come up with a schedule for next year that's similar with the precise dates, since we aren't sitting here with calendars, trying to...
I think we're going to have that discussion here as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. No more comments. Director Hiltz.
I'm just wondering, the initiative to get a decision.
Yes.
Have we got enough information? That's what I'm trying to decide. I'm not sure exactly who's all being excluded. This is kind of what I'm trying.
Do you have enough information?
I'm reluctant.
Okay. What other information would you like?
I'm trying to see the schedule in my head, and I can't quite see the picture in terms of the schedule. Like there's winners and losers in this, and I'm not sure exactly who all the winners and losers.
We're not going to please everybody.
We're not going to please everyone.
That's right.
Yes. It's the significant events, and those are covered off. I guess
the quilt show is the one that will have to be relocated.
This is the
Okay. Any other comments, Director Ties? I know there's lots of that. I'm sorry, we're just going to deal with it up at the board level. Thank you.
Clarification, if you just weighed in on it, it allowed us to make one statement towards this decision.
Okay, what is the board's? Okay, come on up, Kate.
Thank you again.
Oh, push the button on the top of the microphone.
Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. I would like to just clarify what ice sports are actually asking for as the season could look. And it's actually that our actual formal request is to have ice in the Gibson's Ice Arena from August the 1st until the second week of March. That's our current schedule. It has been for a couple of years now. That allows us to run our summer camps. Without August ice, we don't have the ability to run these summer camps, which attract a huge economic benefit to our community. The other part of that, so that does leave a dry floor at the Gibson's Ice Arena from the third week of March until the third week of July, allowing for events like the home show, the Quilters Club, lacrosse, close to the ferry, roller girls, pickleball, to all take part in that arena. The Seashell Ice Arena would open the third week of September, as it has for several years running, and keep ice until May 31st. I can't speak to the viability of that with the Seashell Ice Arena, but we can all note that we usually don't get our extreme heat until June, July, and August. So maybe a report needs to be done about how the Seashell Ice Arena could hold ice to extend to the end of May, but that would also allow for the Seashell Ice Arena to be available for dry floor users from the first week of June until the third week of September, allowing for both sides of the coast to have dry floor and both sides of the coast to have ice. That is our formal request. We are not asking for year-round ice. We are not asking for July ice period. We do see the economic value of having things like the home show and such events, boxing events, and so forth. So, thank you very much.
Okay, roller derby, come up and talk. Okay, so hang on, Kate, before you leave, just give me your dates again. You said Gibson's Aquatic or Gibson's Aquatic.
Ice Arena is from August the 1st until the second week of March.
End of the second week of March.
End of second March 15th, let's call it. And the Sunshine Coast Arena is the third week of September until May 31st, thereabouts.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Roller derby, come on up. This is very unorthodox what we're doing here.
Hi. My name's Kathy. I live in Seashelt, West Seashelt. Just wanted to make sure that everyone kind of knew that we were here too, because it seems through all the conversation that
we've got all your correspondence and we know what's happening. Yes.
Okay, sure.
Okay. What dates are you looking for?
So basically our season starts in March and it ends in September. But that's our gaming season, right? We normally host 3 major games on the coast, which bring in a lot of, we sell tickets, of course, but we put on shows, so it brings a lot of people to the arenas, whichever which way, plus the team that travels with us brings their families, so it brings a lot of people. Plus, we host boot camps. Boot camps bring in at least 100 skaters. When we have those 100 skaters, it brings in their families also, so that fills up hotel rooms, restaurants, everything. And it also, we have local sponsors, and we get TV time as well. So that being said, we get a lot of exposure, but not for just us. It's all over. It's all, the whole community gets that. So I just wanted you guys to know that that really affects us. Plus, we just opened to a junior league. So we now have juniors. Right now, we have 3 junior skaters skating with us. And that is also very, exceptional. So we're opening that up. That just got voted in our league. We've been on the coast since 2010. It hasn't been as long as a lot of the other sports, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone had that statement that we have that. And when we spoke about the elementary schools and the gyms, we've already requested that. We've been denied. We are not allowed to use any school gym facility or tennis courts on the Sunshine Coast. We have written letters of denial for 4 years straight. We've been denied.
Okay,
So
quick question.
Yeah,
you said
go ahead.
March, beginning of March. Is it beginning of March?
Middle. So
middle of March?
middle to the end of March is when we start to look at bringing teams over, and these have to be booked a year in advance, mind you.
So that would work.
So because they're travel, we have teams that come as far from as Saskatchewan that come to play us. So this is very big.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for your time.
Staff?
Thank you, Chair. In hearing the comments from members of the gallery, staff would note that the dates being discussed are different from what was analyzed in the scope of staff's directed work, and different from the request that was made at the end of 2018. If with the motion that's currently being considered, or any other motion, if the committee would like to direct staff to come back with an analysis of implications, financial and also schedule, that is something that staff are prepared to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I don't want to put off the decision, because I know that people are hanging on this decision, but at the same time, we really shouldn't be sitting here with our daytimers thinking, oh, well, let's move it here, let's move it there, without having a proper analysis by staff of what we're doing. So I very much support the suggestion.
Okay, what's the will of the directors? Okay. Would someone like to make a
How
motion to
quickly
defer?
could staff respond?
Could we have something? When?
1:30?
Yeah. Can we have a response by 1:30?
Which day?
Staff.
Thank you, Chair. Staff could prepare that for a committee in February.
So what date are we looking at there? Staff?
Thank you. We would look to try and aim this for February planning and community development, but this is also taking into consideration what else staff have been working on. So that would be the committee we would aim to get it to. It just wouldn't hit the package in time, but it would come.
Second week of February?
Yeah, that second week in
So that'd
February.
give us two,
Yeah,
basically.
those would be the two places that we would, yeah, we're just getting a little bit of feedback from our mic here. Those would be definitely the two places that we would bring it back to, for sure.
So second week in February, is that quick enough for directors?
I guess my question is how does it affect the ability for the organizations to plan around that time frame?
I'm going to look to staff because I think they're the ones who are actually working with the users groups on scheduling.
Thank you, Chair. From staff's perspective, we know user groups are keen to do planning from the middle of March, which is the end of our currently allocated period, through to currently we're allocating through to the end of August. And as noted in the introduction, staff have committed to providing an update to user groups following the committee meeting today.
Okay, what's the will of the board? Director Ties.
I wanted to just quickly voice a couple of concerns. One is that 1st of August is probably unlikely unless we get the water issue solved. So when we're in a water shortage situation, we're not going to be able to put in ice on August 1st. So I doubt that'll happen until that's resolved. And then the other thing is maybe if we're going to postpone the decision, we can at least I could make a motion to move to at least guarantee ice till April 30th. And then that way that gives a little bit more lead time for those that are trying to plan. Yeah, but there's requests for ice time until the end of April, and that's is that not correct, staff?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair. Staff have proceeded with our usual spring and summer allocation process, which does seek requests for ice from the middle of March, and we worked with user groups. Staff worked with user groups over the last couple of weeks to enumerate all of the requests through to the end of May. Currently, based on the requested times, the bookings requested cover the incremental costs very closely for ice in one facility, and until the end of April. That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pratt.
Just to clarify, and I'm sure staff will correct me if I'm wrong, but the Gibsons facility receives their water from the town of Gibsons, not through the Chapman system. Correct?
Staff?
Oh.
Thank you. So just a point, opportunity for clarification. So it is actually the Zone 3. It is Chapman Water that is in that facility. So that's one part. The second part is in with the recent droughts, not to get this conversation off the rails or off and to another subject matter, but the SDRD has taken mitigated our own operational uses of water through a number of different ways. The ice is one, but there are other ways that we've also done that. Not washing buses, doing a number of things. So that's part and parcel of what I think is being referenced in terms of that context.
Director Beamish?
I think part of the discussion, perhaps staff could talk to town of Gibsons about whether or not water could be available from the town supply into the arena in Gibsons during that period of time. And I know it's a terrible optic if we're doing that, but it may be possible. But that'd be something to have to look at with the town staff.
And then revisit the other coming back in 2 weeks. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor right now that we need to deal with. Could you repeat the motion that's on the floor?
Thank you, Chair Seegers. recommended that for 2019, one ice surface be guaranteed from September 1st to May 26th.
So that would be May 26th, 2019, with ice going back in September 1st. That's the motion that's on the floor right now. What would you like to do with that motion? Would you like to vote on it? Yes, Director Beamish?
Chair, I'm going to second the motion, but I'll speak against it only in favor of enabling staff to have time to analyze the new requests.
So would you like to make a motion to defer that motion? Or should we vote on it and it looks like it'll probably be defeated? Okay, so all those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Okay, so the motion is defeated. Any other motions that would like to be brought forward?
Sorry, I guess I'd like to make a motion to ask staff to report back on the feasibility to the next planning and committee development meeting. This is always the difficulty with crafting a motion on the floor. For the second week in February, in order to on the feasibility of the ice.
Recommendations of ice scheduling and feasibility and impacts on the regional district.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that clear? Probably not.
Tara? Yes, please. Tara's going to try for us.
The decision to amend the arena floor season be deferred pending staff report to mid-February to provide an analysis of the feasibility, financial implications, and schedule for the dates requested by various arena user groups.
That's exactly
Excellent.
what I said. Thank you, Tara.
Would someone like to second that motion? Director Ties, any discussion on that motion?
I'd like to just add that also in the meantime that we approve ice in one facility until April 30th.
Okay, I'd like to hold that separate. We'll vote on this one
Okay.
first, and then we'll let you make the other motion. Okay, any other comments on the motion on the floor? Yes. Could we also add to bring that to the board today?
Yes. I'll make that amendment.
Thank you. And seconded? Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion on the floor?
We have to vote on the amendment first.
Yes. Okay. Vote on the amendment to bring it to the board. All in favor? Okay. And then vote on the motion as amended. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, Director Ties, now your additional motion.
Yes, I'd like to add a motion that ice be guaranteed at one arena until April 30th, until the report from staff comes back second week of February, and then we can make further decisions.
Okay, so just to be clear, are you looking to guarantee ice in one arena till April 30th of this year?
Of this year.
And then the rest of the ice allocations will be determined once the report from staff comes back?
Correct.
Okay. A seconder for that motion. Staff.
Thank you, Chair. So the motion as described would be in alignment with current policy and is what staff are working on right now with user groups. So effectively, our current policy and procedures are such that staff are prepared to do exactly what the motion states already.
Okay.
Thank you.
So no need for the motion? Okay.
I think that will provide some clarity to the user groups, though, at this point, to know that this is where we are at this point, and that any other decisions be made following the report back from staff at the next meeting. Okay. All those in favor? Oh, question, Director Ties.
Just making sure I understand. So this is a kind of a stopgap to get us till next week?
Yes.
And
Well, it's a few weeks. It's about 3 weeks down the road.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? All those in favor? Thank you very much. All right. Yeah. Thank you. I think that's it for now. I think we're going to take about a 5-minute break and let the people in the gallery who'd like to leave. Thank you. Okay, directors, let's call this meeting back to order and move through the rest of this. Out of control directors. Director Ties. Sorry? Yeah. I wore long sleeves on this jacket. Okay, Director Ties, come and join us.
Where's the gavel when you need it?
I have it here somewhere. Hang on. Okay, we're going to move to item number 5, Annex C.
Item 5?
Yes, item 5. I know. We've got, about 45 minutes, 50 minutes? See if we can have this done by noon. All right, turn it over to General Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Since 2016, SCRD has maintained a 20-year capital plan for recreation facilities. This plan guides the replacement of facility components in order to maintain safe, continuous service and maximize the lifespan of publicly funded facilities. The chiller and associated compressors at the Sunshine Coast Arena are planned for replacement in 2019. Through the planning phase of the project, factors including superseding technology that reduces refrigerant needs and an interface with newly enforced WorkSafe BC and Technical Safety BC regulations have been identified. As well, the project costing information provided in 2016 has been identified as out of date. Staff recommend proceeding with the project as planned using current plate and frame technology. This approach will address regulatory requirements. The financial implications for the project can be managed through the 20-year capital plan and are considered in the next report on the committee's agenda as part of an update to the recreation facilities capital plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from directors? Director Baban?
Well, it's not really questions. I just had some general comments on this. We have a lot of recreation facilities per taxpayer in this, and I note that we have no service plan or asset management plan for our community recreation facilities, nor do we have what we need, the zero emissions plan for how we're going to get there in recreation. So by spending this money now, we're essentially committing ourselves to keep this ice rink running for another 20 years. And, I'm not sure whether that's a good idea or not. I really don't. I also note that the actual costs of replacing this chiller are much higher than were previously assumed. So it leaves me wondering if the capital management plan is not kind of underestimated for the actual costs that we will be incurring. I promised not to use the term sinkhole when talking about budgets, so I'll say money pit, but the recreation facilities are in fact money pits, and
you said it anyway.
Darn. So I would like to, have a bigger conversation about how we are going to manage recreation in an era of climate change. And finally, I was curious, I did have one question for staff, and that was about the building envelopes for the Seashell Arena and the Gibson's Pool, which are, I think it said, handled separately, and I didn't quite understand what that meant, so I was just wondering what that meant.
Staff, would you like to address the question?
Thank you, Chair Seegers. So the Recreation Capital Plan deals with critical building components for facilities and does not include building envelopes. And thank you.
Tina?
Sorry, I was just catching up on sort of what the process of the question was. So, yes, the current plan that was drafted back in 2016 that's been reviewed as part of the implications of this particular project. So the fulsome review hasn't been done. We'll talk about it a little bit in the next report, so I don't want to jump too far ahead. But in order to contemplate answer the question, the original plan did not make a decision about what the next phases of those facilities would entail, so it doesn't include the building envelope. So the decision as to do we reconstruct the facility at the end of its useful life or build a new facility or what we do at the end, that decision hasn't been made. So back to the point of a service plan or those types of things, it's correct. They haven't fully been vetted.
Okay, so a question, follow-up to that then. If we were to put this equipment into this facility now, could this equipment be used in a new facility? Could it be transferable to a new facility?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if there's remaining service life, it could be redeployed. Staff would comment that it's not sized for use at Gibson's and Area Community Center, but there is a market for used ice plant equipment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Tice?
As I understand it, the newer ice rinks that are being put in now probably have insulated floor or some kind of insulation underneath the ice, so that they're much more energy efficient, and then that waste heat can then be used to heat, I don't know, a pool, a neighborhood, something beside it, rather than throwing all the waste heat back in the floor underneath the ice to prevent the rink from turning into permafrost. So I guess a new facility would probably need a much smaller chiller. Would that be correct?
Staff? That may not be anything you've even looked at or considered at this point.
Thank you, Chair. No, staff haven't done a comprehensive analysis of opportunities that might come from a new facility. With equipment that's replaced through the capital plan, for every project, an energy and water reduction analysis is completed. And so, for example, in 2017, when some equipment was replaced, instead of using hot water to make ice, now we're using cold water, and with substantial energy savings. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm just going to address Director McMahon's other comment around the long-term viability and implications of the facilities that we have. That is a conversation that's been had at this table in previous years, but it's probably a conversation that this new board should have as well. And I think Tina's going to be going into some of that in the next report. Okay, so we have some recommendations on page 57. Yes, Director Beamish.
So, Chair, on page 60, you commented about the middle of the page that delivering year-round ice at Sunshine Coast Arena would require substantially increasing refrigeration capacity to a range of 120 tons. So the proposal for the new equipment that we're considering, it will not provide year-round ice if we chose to go in that direction in the future? Is that correct?
Staff? My understanding in reading the report, and I'll defer to you then, is that it's not necessarily the ice, but the building itself as well does not have the insulation, et cetera, which makes the creating ice and keeping it more problematic and more costly. But staff.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, you are correct. It would be an entire system change for various plant components. The building envelope would factor into the sizing of refrigeration equipment. The analysis that's been done on this project to date has identified that in order to keep ice for sort of 3 seasons, a slight increase in refrigeration capacity responding to climate change is likely needed. The engineering hasn't been completed. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Yeah, just so the recommendation we actually almost made earlier, talking about ice from April the 1st, or August the 1st rather, or in August, would that be possible in this configuration with this equipment?
With this facility? Are you asking for this facility?
With that facility, yes.
Yes. Staff?
Thank you, Chair. It may be technically feasible as plants are run higher to their design capacity, they become less efficient, and so even if it was technically feasible, it may be substantially more efficient to run a larger plant at a lower load in Gibson's. Thank you.
Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at a couple of questions about the dates. So this is RFP 18373, which was on, the bids closed on January the 8th. That's what's on the bid opportunities for the regional district's website. So this is done. Is that right? No?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair. The RFP referenced was for engineering and design work, and that's what's led staff to bring this report forward, because we are looking at something that is different from what was initially contemplated. And following direction received on this report, staff would then proceed with another bid opportunity for the construction work. Thank you.
Director Hiltz, follow-up?
Follow-up. So the scope on the actual design is still kind of in the works then. That will be, there's still latitude for changing a scope in terms of the replacement of the equipment. What I'm specifically thinking about is what's been in the media recently is the CO2 technologies. Various Campbell River has just they announced a CO2 technology and an energy saving. So I was wondering, has it been scoped in terms of the energy recovery, different technologies, potential grants because of the greenhouse gas emissions, the LGLA, they were mentioning this grant that's available. So I'm wondering if that's been considered in the scope of this project.
Staff.
Thank you, Chair. So with the current design work, it is quite advanced. Whether there's, of course, there's still room to change design until we're into a construction phase. Alternatives to ammonia refrigeration were considered. The change, such a change is more than just a change to the refrigerant that's used in the system. It involves changing many components to the facility and running much higher compression, and so was deemed not to be practical, although especially given the concerns around the safe use of ammonia was considered. Thank you.
Any other questions? Would anyone like to entertain the motions on page 57? Director Ties moves them. Is there a seconder? Director Hiltz? All those in favor? Any opposed? Would you like that recorded? Thank you. Let's move on to Appendix D on page 62, and we're going to turn over to Tina. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I wanted to take this opportunity just to provide a little bit of context as well as far as where we've landed as far as the 20-year capital plan. So, of course, the understanding that the SCRD operates 4 recreation facilities now. And so when the community recreation facilities function was first being contemplated, operational and capital reserves of approximately $250,000 per year were supposed to be included in the budget. So that's really what led us to having to develop the capital plans when we started doing our asset management plan, because that didn't actually occur. And so 10 years after the facilities were being contemplated, we were essentially very unsustainably we were financially unsustainable. So in 2016, the 20-year capital plans were created, and several scenarios were presented to the board to fund asset renewal in the facilities over a 20-year lifespan. So again, noting that it was just a 20-year lifespan with no decisions as far as what do those end dates look like. So the results of that process indicated that the SCRD could not fully fund all the asset renewal required. So that's what the 4 tables and the appendixes provide you, is an updated scenario as to really if we wanted to fully fund those facilities, it would require an investment of approximately $1.3 million a year. So the SCRD selected to only fund critical assets. And so the staff just want to note that critical assets were really determined to keep the doors open. So there is an acknowledgement that a review of what critical means to those particular facilities needs to be contemplated as part of a service plan. So the annual contribution was estimated to be a flat annual rate of $725 to fund those critical assets. At that particular time, the board resolved to start by contributing $500,000 in 2016. That was a significant increase, and it was funded by a combination of increase in taxation as well as some debt falling off from the original construction of those facilities. So in 2016, it was $500,000. Other opportunities for other funding increased it to $548 in 2017, to where in 2018 we're up to about $725,000. So numerous changes in both the funding strategy and the expected costs in the capital plan have resulted in a need for a capital plan review. The result of this is part of the chiller replacement being significantly higher than what was contemplated, the increased aggregate cost of several projects completed since 2016 and delayed projects that haven't been started, and the under-target funding in 2016 and 17 has further created an infrastructure deficit, if you would. Therefore, it's recommended that the capital shortfall be resolved through changing the funding model for recreation facilities to a flat annual contribution of $740,000. So that would be an increase of $15,000 funded through taxation, which would meet the requirements for the chiller as well as the other capital needs. So staff can take any questions if there are any.
Directors? Director McMahon?
I remember seeing this report when it came out a couple of years ago, and great work, because this should have been done years ago. Maybe even before building all these expensive facilities would have been a really clever idea, says the woman who writes business plans. And so I'm very glad to go forward with the staff's recommendations at this point, but we do totally need a recreation plan. We need to look at this again. Thanks.
Director Tice?
Yeah, my question to staff is when would be that discussion as to what is critical and what isn't, and does that need to happen at the board table, or is that a staff thing? Because I'm pretty sure that the people that are working at the facilities are probably the ones that know best as to what is critical and what is not.
Staff?
I think it's in combination to creating a more fulsome asset management and service plan for the facility. I think just focusing on the critical assets without including the programming is a disconnect for any service. So whether it be recreation or wastewater or water, you have to match the service level with the asset requirements. So what do we need in order to facilitate those programs? So I think that you'd have to match those two, and that's where the service plan work that staff are currently undertaking. So staff are working on that in conjunction with the asset management plan, but the two have not been crossed over yet. So when will that come to you? I think it's really contingent on resources. There's a lot of this type of work that needs to happen in the regional district, and so what is the priority service level to do? Is it the water functions? Is it the wastewater functions? Is it the recreation facilities, solid waste, etc.? So there's a lot. So I can't give you a date right now, but staff are actively working on it.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'm just going to make a comment on it. Personally, I'd like to see that come probably early fall, because I think that's going to have to inform budget for next year, and that gives us sufficient time to get that conversation out in the community. I know that's pushing it, but I think, and overall, it may not be ready at that point. But what I'm hearing at the table is there's no understanding of, I've got the tables in this report, but there's no understanding of the big picture. And whatever pieces you have at that point, I think will be beneficial to the board, including some of the work that was done in the Recreation Master Plan around, the Gibson's Pool, the Seashelt Arena, etc., and a bit of that history around that, so that we know where we're at to lead into the budget for next year. Does that kind of encapsulate what I'm hearing here? Okay. And we understand you probably won't have all that work done by that time. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. So the risk of not going forward is essentially we defer costs until the future, and we just dig a deeper hole in terms of the asset kind of deficit?
So it outlines in the report where you're going to need to borrow in order to match the needs. And so what we're experiencing, whether it be community recreations or other projects, is that sometimes the timing of that, so we can model this as much, but really the market conditions dictate some of these things. So in the case of this project, it was estimated at $167,000. Now we're up to $741 because, of course, needs change, etc. So in the report, it estimates that we're okay for a certain time frame if we continue to fund this, but any change to that, we would be underfunded.
Director Rowe.
So just to confirm, CFO, the $750K a year, that's just for critical coverage?
Yes, Chair, that's correct. And so an example where we had to find other funding sources when we had to replace all the fitness equipment, which will be coming to you for consideration, so that wasn't approved. So that wasn't considered critical, because critical means essentially keeping the doors open. It doesn't, that's where I was mentioning, it doesn't tie the programming. So it does need a revisit.
Okay. And just one other question, just going back to our orientation with Christina Benty, where she was talking about service target levels, I think, around user fees and taxpayers. What is, do we have that for recreation?
Okay, staff?
The short answer is no. We haven't matched our fees and charges with the capital requirements as we've contemplated, say, for the regional water service. So the regional water model that we currently have matches the capital demand and the user fees to operate with the fees and charges. So no, we don't have that currently with recreation, but that's the work that staff have identified need to be done.
So that's part of the bigger conversation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the things that was identified in previous years was that it is costly to run recreation facilities. We have a small population. We have 4 facilities, large facilities. And there is an understanding that they will always be subsidized through taxation. It's the level of taxation that we're looking at in order to not only do the critical, but the maintenance and the upgrades that are required going forward. When we have something like we have in Seashelt now, where the arena requires this change in that we didn't anticipate, right? We didn't anticipate this. It actually pretty much depletes the money that we've set aside. So we're not funding as high a level as what we need to in order to stay ahead of the curve. If something happens where we have an emergency situation, we may not have the funds to do that. And an example that happened a few years ago, which really brought this to light, was the Sunshine Coast Arena. Right. So those are the kinds of conversations that we'll need to have later on down the road. And as I said, I think it needs to happen before the next budget, because this is something we need to have for the community. And you won't have, we understand, we're dealing with water, we're dealing with all of these. It probably will be a higher level conversation with not as much detail as you would like to bring to us at that time. And we'd understand. Staff.
Yeah, I think there's acknowledgement from staff that maybe some orientation as we have for other services. So, bringing back the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, the service plan review that was done that contemplated some of the subsidization funding. So, hearing that staff will work on trying to provide something like that in the near future.
Okay, let's go back to the recommendations that are in front of us. So moved and seconded. Anybody second that? Second. Any further comment before we vote? Director McMahon?
Well, this is slightly off topic, so maybe a process thing, but I'm just wondering if we do look at recreation again, if it would be worth striking a committee to do that, separate from our usual procedure at the board, because it's a lot, just saying.
I think that may be something that we could contemplate once we've actually had that orientation session. Okay, thanks. All right, I'm going to call for a vote on this. All those in favor? Everybody voted for it, and you abstain, obviously, because you're not in this function. That's right. Thank you. All right. Number 7, This is on wastewater asset management and rate review, and back to Tina on page 78.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in 2018, the SCRD initiated an asset management review of its inventory, condition, operational funding, capital funding, and organizational strategy in the wastewater service areas. This review is ongoing, but has identified several key operational issues that require further attention. An introductory report on wastewater was provided at the November 2018 Infrastructure Services Committee, highlighting the operational, regulatory, and capital constraints for the various facilities. We also, staff arranged for a facility tour of one of the wastewater facilities to try to get some context to this particular issue. The asset management work is ongoing, and preliminary results completed to date indicates that both operational and capital funding are in a shortfall position. So until the asset management review is completed, staff are recommending an incremental approach to address operational needs in the short term. Therefore, a user fee increase of 25% is proposed for 2019, which is intended to make a material impact to operational funding while keeping rate increases sustainable for the user groups. This will allow for more time for staff to develop the asset management plan, including the capital needs. This is scheduled to be completed at the end of 2019, and it's also recommended that frontage charges be increased by 2% in 2019, which is the approach in line with the increases for the regional North and South Pender water systems just undertaken earlier this month. So both the user fees and frontage fees should be expected for increases in 2020. Staff are also acknowledging that a significant amount of public engagement will need to be done for these small local service areas. So a plan is being developed and will be presented to the committee for information. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Director McMahon.
Not a question. I just think good report, excellent next step, and I support this.
Any other comments? Director Hiltz?
Yeah, thanks for the report. We knew that this is coming. The question I have is kind of in the communication strategy and kind of this is not where we're collaborating on fees. This is more directive, this is about informing the public after the decision is made. This is kind of, I'm looking at it, we'll tell people after we've done this. We haven't gone out beforehand to going, I'm wondering how much does the user groups know about what's going on?
Staff?
That's my question.
So I think there is a small acknowledgement with the community groups that some work is going on. For instance, we just undertook a CCDV program, so letters have been sent to some of the user groups.
Sorry, CCDV?
Camera program to inspect some of all the infrastructure. Sorry. That's never been done for the systems before, so it's informing the particular plan. So at this particular time, to answer the director's question, there hasn't been a consultation phase, so that's why staff are acknowledging we need to do something. Budget is here. We need to have, if we don't approve a small increase, we won't be able to do any operational impacts to try to improve what we need to do. So that's part of the budget contemplations for next week. So communication on the first interim step, but then a further, more in-depth consultation, because the needs of each service area are not the same. So it wouldn't be a standardized letter for each particular service area. So for example, Wood Creek's letter would not be the same as it would be for Square Bay. So that's what's also a little bit complicated to this.
Follow-up?
Follow-up. So this is nudging it in the right direction, kind of a low risk, and there will be more to come.
Yes.
So it sounds like when the initial letter goes out, there could be some information in that letter indicating that this process is underway, that these are all being evaluated, and potential changes to rates and fees could be coming down the road, so that now they get the heads up that this has happened and they're in review. Would that fulfill that would work for you? Okay, perfect. Staff? That's okay. Any other comments? Director Lee?
Yeah, there's quite a few of these in my area. I brought it up at the APC to kind of give them a heads up that this might be happening. some were surprised and some were okay. The question was, though, what the heck do you do at the plant to start with? Because it's not well known what it takes to operate a plant. So I kind of look at it as part of the whole budgeting process, and it's good to have this out in the open. I noticed Seashell did a pre-budget. I was wondering, we don't seem to do that. Or if we do a pre-budget, we don't take it to our areas. So my question is two things. Are you going to get a letter out before the finalization of the budget, or is it going to be after? And is there an opportunity for us, which is, I should probably be discussing this at some other time, but is there an opportunity for us to take a total budget package to our areas, specifically for our areas, and explain it to our user groups? So that's two questions.
Staff?
So staff have highlighted have made notes about some of those, because I think those are some of the feedback that we'd want on the local areas on, how do we engage these groups? Because, of course, the area directors will be involved in this. So appreciate those comments, because, again, staff might have an approach and it might not be what you're hearing in your community. So we've made notes on that. So the timing, I think, is really what I'm hearing is I think at staff at this point it's always very delicate when you're trying to contemplate an increase like this, because are we informing the group? I think that's what we're saying is at this point we need to do something in order to make some change for 2019, realizing that the next step would be, I think, what the director is suggesting, which is some feedback, some education, some acknowledgement on what the ratepayers are able to pay, because in some of the facilities it's pretty significant what the increases might look like in the future. So there has to be some collaboration with the local service areas, because
and it sounds like also in that information could be, what does it cover? What do we do, right? What does it cover at the facilities? I just wanted to make a point, and this is for the directors. I've already indicated this to Tina. In the district of Seashelt, we have the Dusty Road facility, which is where septage is received, and then we have our sewage treatment plant, our water resource center. Currently, we have one cost center in Seashelt. Everything is lumped together, and we are looking at separating it out so we would have a separate cost center for the Dusty Road plant, because currently we don't know if the septage that comes in is actually covering off the costs to run that. That may or may not, so I'm just giving a heads up, may or may not increase or impact rates for pickup along the coast, and some of the treatment facilities do require septage pump out. Okay, so that's another piece. All right, yes, Director Lee.
I did forget to mention, though, that the users are very happy with the fact that it's a user pay that we're talking about here. So I like the model, and I like the breakout of the capital from the operations. So it's that part was very nice to see. So thank you.
Director Tice?
Yeah, I just have one question, maybe for just to clarify for all the directors. What are frontage fees, and why is there a splitting of frontage fees and user fees, and why is there not just a flat thing? So maybe we can clarify that.
Thank you. Staff?
So frontage fees are really defined in the bylaw, which is bylaw 428. It's a tax levied in each year on each parcel of land capable of being connected to a sewage treatment facility. So that's the definition in the bylaw. So the user fee is essentially when you're connected to the system.
So in other words, an empty lot would still pay a frontage fee, but not necessarily a user fee.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? Director Lee?
My understanding of that, basically put in layman's terms, is that the frontage fee handles the capital, and the user fee handles the operations of the plant. That's how I think of it. I think I have that right. Is that right? Yes.
Sounds right. Any other comments? Okay, can I direct you back to the recommendations on page 78? And what's the board? You'd like to make the motion? So moved. Second. All those in favor? Thank you very much. On page 2, yes. So this is one of the reports that got added in. So depending which agenda you're looking at, you may need to take the hard copy. This is from the General Manager of Infrastructure Services with regards to Rural Area Curbside Collection Services Award. And I turn back over to, now is Tina, you're handling this again, or is Remco joining us?
Thank you. So we're just going to go and grab staff, but I think in the spirit of the time here, we should start, and he'll join us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Seegers. So staff just do want to point out some information that was provided on directors' desks there. And it is one piece of information that I think certainly staff heard last January the 25th when we did have a special infrastructure services committee meeting to talk about the report that was on the agenda. And so it's the curbside collection service option report dated February the 22nd, 2018. And so this is in essence where the former board had approved a service level and which then was followed through in terms of the actual RFP. So there's a lot of questions that were asked and also subsequently raised, and some of the answers are provided in this report in terms of things. And so just recognition that this would have also been helpful at our last meeting. And then on the March 8th meeting of 2018, there was also a recognition of the motion that was actually approved. And you will notice that there is a slight change in it because it was actually amended at the board. So this is just a good process in history. The staff had recommended food scraps in the report, and then in the recommendation that was actually approved at the board, amended at the board, and approved was organics. And the intent of using that was to also acknowledge green waste and food waste in that. That was how the former board defined organics. So with that, there is a report that is in your package as well, and staff are happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Okay, so first I'm going to check with directors and make sure you have all this paper that we're talking about. Right, so you have the one package that has a recommendation on the front of it. That includes the reports that the our CAO just talked about with the history. Including behind the front page is the previous recommendation that the board made with the organics weekly. And then we have the report, the late amended agenda item in hard copy with the recommendations. Okay, any questions of staff? Okay, I'm just gonna weigh in here. I'm not even actually on this function, but what I'm hearing is that there's a request to defer some of this for more information and more discussion, and there's a need to address the garbage piece, given that contract is expiring. Given that there was a change in company ownership, we do not have the option to go month by month for garbage. If it was the same company, we could potentially do that and deal with all of it at once. So perhaps, is there an appetite at the board now to look at garbage separate and then deal with the others? Is that what I've been hearing inside the conversation? And I'd open it up to comments. Director McMahon?
Trying to think this through. I have a lot of questions as regards how the organics program would work and where the organics would go and how they would be monitored for contamination and who would ensure this and what would happen if the loads were refused by the processor because of too high a contamination rate and so forth. That said, I do like the idea of moving to biweekly garbage with weekly organics. I think that that makes sense as a package. What I'm not sure we can actually discuss the garbage just by itself. I'm process issue here. The recycling is a whole other can of worms. And again, process question. How much time do we have right now given the agenda?
Okay, I'll turn that over to staff.
Thank you. So just to clarify, so the way that the RFP was issued, and it was issued with our local governments under this idea, is that any of the streams can be awarded. So you're not recognizing that you're not bound to award all of the streams, but you can award different combinations of the streams. And staff also recognized and certainly heard at the Friday meeting, the infrastructure meeting, is that there is a real desire to have more conversations and perhaps look at setting different service levels and or making some different types of policy decisions. And so we would echo Chair Seeger's comment as staff as well. So awarding the garbage is feasible, the contract for that. It does end the end of February, the contract. There are no renewable clauses to that contract, regardless of who the proponent was. It's not currently feasible. And then we would also follow up on the recommendation of having a special infrastructure meeting to talk about the other streams and the other questions and things that were asked, and sort of delving a little bit deeper into all of those, and then perhaps setting decisions, service levels from those.
Okay, I'm just going to follow up on that. Given that we would be looking at this time, if we move forward, with weekly garbage collection, is there room in the negotiations or in the contract to change the frequency once other streams come on board?
Thank you, Chair Seegers. So that would certainly be part of the discussion that we would want to have with the proponent. And so in recognition of the discussion that happened at the special infrastructure meeting, we did prepare some possible recommendations that would allow us to go back and explore what that would look like and report back. So we're taking that option off the table, but we haven't had that discussion, so there is possibly some opportunity here.
Okay, so I'm going to direct the directors, or have you look at the motion that was provided by staff. See if that covers off the questions that you have around this at this time, and if it addresses where we want to go with this. So it's on the front of this package. It's not that one. It's that RFP 18334, garbage manual collection services be awarded to Waste Management, and that staff be authorized to negotiate both weekly and bi-weekly services to ensure business continuity of the service and report back the costs and terms, and that a special infrastructure service committee meeting be scheduled in February 2019, date to be determined, to discuss policy decisions and service levels with respect to solid waste services. Does that cover off the discussions and where the board would like to go with this? Director McMahon.
I think this is where we want to go, because I don't think we can move to bi-weekly garbage collection until we have other support in place for organics and so forth. So as long as we've got the flexibility to move the other services into place, I'm good with this.
Thank you. Director Hiltz?
Yeah, the current report for me helps to express the risks that we're dealing with in terms of business continuity and that getting the organics out of the waste stream will be achieved. And managing organic waste on the coast is easier than processing recyclables which are shipped off the coast. So it seems to be hitting a lot of targets. It's the opting out that isn't included, and I'd be interested in the 87D, the opting out of the organics. Just I feel the responsibility to understand that information so that would be something to add to the motion is what I would be looking at is as staff recommended before it all rolls out that we understand what the opting out options could be.
Okay, I think that's part of the further conversation. That's
Okay.
not part of this recommendation here. This recommendation is looking at garbage, and that would be a conversation as part of the Special Infrastructure Service Committee meeting down the road. Okay, so that's not on the table at this point, but it is part of the conversation that we have to have ongoingly.
So where would that get introduced into the...
It doesn't get introduced into this.
Okay.
We're only dealing with garbage at this point. We're saying all of the rest of that, opting in, opting out, sizes of bins, frequency, who gets it, what it looks like, all of that is part of something that would come after that Special Infrastructure Service Committee meeting, so that we actually get to explore those in depth at that point. Okay, Director Beamish?
I guess the only question I have with the resolution, and again, I'm not part of voting on it, is there's no dollar amount, either maximum or minimum, mentioned in terms of the resolution, just awarding a contract to Waste Management and that you're going to report back on the costs in terms of that contract. Is it because the contract amount would be different from what was originally proposed if we separate out the organics. Is that correct?
I'm going to address this first, and then I'll turn to staff. We're looking at garbage continuity. That's it. That's all we're looking at this point, right? So we have no idea of numbers. The contract was looking at all of the package, and until we decide what the package is, we can't come up with a cost. So we don't know. We're just saying pick up garbage. Yeah, okay. And because that's going to change too once the others roll out, right? Okay, I'd have one question about this. For that Special Infrastructure Service Committee meeting, would we also invite the other municipalities? Thank you.
Thank you. So staff have identified a window, and they're actually doing the cross-referencing right now, but the answer is yes. We would definitely want to ensure that our member municipalities are part of that discussion.
Okay, so this is a motion that would be voted on only by areas B, D, E, and F. So would one of those like to make this recommendation? So moved? Would you like this? So moved and seconded. Any other discussion, comment? All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Did you want to make a comment?
Just a quick comment. I think it's a good compromise, and so we can further look at what policy as this new board moves forward. So I think that's why we're still providing our same service level, providing continuity of service, and looking at additional options to divert from a policy level. So thank you to staff for working on this.
Thank you. Let's move on to item number 9. Thank you, Mr. Rosenboom. Yes, we did. It voted. Everybody voted, right, Tara? We voted. Done. You put your hand up. I saw it. Okay, item number 9. This is ABICC resolutions. And Angie is looking at speaking to this.
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of time, I'll keep it quick. Basically, I've prepared some draft resolutions for consideration of the committee in relation to the topics that were generated at the Infrastructure Services Committee meeting. So I'm looking for the committee to review the draft resolutions, either amend, approve, or abandon the resolutions as provided in the report.
Yeah. Director McMahon?
I just like to say I thought they were really good. I had no idea we sounded that coherent.
Any other comments by other directors? Would someone like to make the recommendation that's on page 88? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Good job, Angie. Item number 10, Provincial Nominee Regional Pilot Program. And this will be Angie and Tina taking this one on.
Thank you. The Sunshine Coast Regional Economic Development Organization has approached the SCRD as well as the District of Sechelt and Town of Gibsons to participate in the Provincial Nominee Regional Pilot Program for Immigrant Entrepreneurs. They identified a number of subsectors for development and distributed them across the 3 local government applications. Because there are some commitments from the SCRD attached to the application, staff have brought the proposal forward for approval, and if endorsed, the recommendation should be brought forward to this afternoon's board meeting.
Any comments, questions? Director McMahon?
I get to be the naysayer again here, but I will say this. I've had quite a bit of experience with the provincial PNP program when I was on the Chamber of Commerce and also as a business plan writer. I've written a number of business plans for this program, and I honestly do not think it is a good program. While I'm sure that there are fine and wonderful people who have come to this country through this program, there also is widespread abuse of the program, and I have not seen any indication that the province has evaluated the success of the program to see if it has met the goals and objectives that it has, and whether it has in fact been economically helpful to rural areas. In the absence of any evidence that way, I find it hard to support the program. It looks a whole lot like buying Canadian citizenship, and it's not popular in a lot of quarters.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
Thank you. So to address Director McMahon's concerns, because I completely understand them, because we have had a lot of businesses, frankly, crash and burn in this community, and that's one of the concerns that has been brought up. And this program has been developed similar to the last provincial nominee program. However, it's different in now that the chair and Director Beamish were also at a meeting that I was at as well, where we had this more fully explained. What happens now is that they have to have a business plan that is also signed off on by the community that fits in with the community vision. There has to be a match within the community. So it's not just simply coming in, buying up a business and running it or not to gain citizenship. It's starting a new business. So it's more of a spirit of entrepreneurship, of coming into a community with a business plan that matches for that community. So it's from what I've seen, it's a better iteration than what was there before. There seems to be a few more checks and balances in the system, which was hopeful, and we definitely brought forward those concerns as well, because that's a fear in our community, because it has happened in the past.
Director Hiltz.
Questions on page 93. It's the SCRD is committed to participate, and I'm wondering what participation costs. How much is participation cost?
Staff? Do we have any idea? I'll give you a little background, because I don't know how much staff knows on this. The Regional Economic Development Organization actually made the application to be a referring member, and then because we're municipalities inside of that, if somebody, for example, wanted to come to Sechelt, they would have to come with their prepared business plan, have to come to us at the municipality, and we would have to sign off on it and accept it, that yes, that is something we want. The business plan seems viable based on what we're looking at in our community, and then they would have to go and implement that. And there are checks and balances along the way. They have to employ a certain number of employees, invest a certain amount of money, and depending on that, it's anywhere from $400,000 up. So The companies that have actually approached us, and this was one of the ones that we actually met with, their job is to actually work with those people coming in to ensure that they're prepared, they know what they're coming in to do, and that they have the support here on the Sunshine Coast to also be successful. So that's the piece behind that. As a municipality, my understanding is that we basically sign off on it and that's it. And the Scredo would do the rest. They're doing all of that with the chambers, et cetera, behind the scenes. And I could turn over to staff, see if there's anything else.
Thank you, Chair Seegers. Helpful description there. So the only part that staff would add is on page 95, and consistent with what's been shared. Our understanding is that the business plans that would be presented would be under those three categories. That's what I understand how this application works.
I'll give you a little more on that as well. I've talked extensively with Dave Chisholm, and what he indicated was that those were put in there because they go into the database for sorting. So if somebody's actually looking for a specific item, they can search by that to find municipalities that have identified that to start out with the mix, but that doesn't mean that that's all that we would be taking here on the Sunshine Coast. Okay, Director Beamish.
Yeah, and I guess I wouldn't want anybody left with the impression that we are actually actively looking for gambling investment on the coast either. Recreation industries, I think, is probably the area we want to be in, and the gaming aspect never came up in conversations that I've been involved in.
No, we were looking for destination tourism. They talked zip line. I love zip lines. Yes. Okay. Questions? Director McMahon?
I would support this if we make a recommendation to Scredo that they track and evaluate the success of this program afterwards.
Okay, sounds good. Director Pratt, any question? Director Hiltz.
One last question. This is about this, the priority economic sectors. And has Scredo written what our priority economic sectors are, or like how were they selected? That's like I'm thinking hillside industrial, right? This is what I'm going, marine kind of industries like the hillside, and I'm going, that I don't see that here. I'm wondering how we came up with these three, and if we know about that.
We were limited to that in the application. We were limited to three in the application. What has been playing out since is I believe Mayor Beamish and Chair Pratt have been contacted by various companies looking to bring people here. We are directing them to Scredo. They are going to be looking to do a consolidated workshop of some sort and tour of the region with whoever comes forward. So we've already got 3 to 5 different organizations who are looking to come forward. This is where they're going to start, and they're going to expand beyond that. There's a whole list. When we got together, there's a page of different items that we've identified. Director Beamish.
Yeah, just to comment on that, marine opportunities were heavily discussed by us at the time with Scredo and marine servicing and marine boat repairs and things of that nature.
And I know that District of Sechelt has signed this already. Has Gibson signed this already as well?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, so we have a recommendation.
Do we want to amend it with Donna's?
Do you want to amend it? Okay. Would you like to make amendment?
Here we go on the fly again. I'm always saying don't go on the fly.
And that the committee provide direction on the execution of the application for the SU. So that we sign, that we, what would you like it to say? You need to have it say that the chair.
That we recommend that Scredo monitor and evaluate the program and report back to us.
Okay. And add it on to staff?
That the delegated authorities be authorized to sign the application.
Okay. You have that? Okay. That's the recommendation. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Perfect.
and then recommend that it goes to the board meeting this afternoon.
Thank you. Second? All those in favor? Thank you very much. Item number 11, parcel tax roll review panel, and Tina?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we're looking for 3 individuals on the board to sit on the parcel tax review panel. So in essence, to save time, if there's any questions about the process, happy to answer them. But yes, we're looking for 3 people to sit on the panel.
Okay, I need 3 names. 3 hands up. Who wants to be on this panel? Director Hiltz?
It's the February 21st is Infrastructure Services that day. This starts at 9 o'clock, so...
It'll be done by 9:30.
Be done by 9:30?
Yes.
All 3 of my hand up.
Yeah. Director Hiltz? 2 more. Director Lee, Director Pratt. There you go. So that Director Hiltz, Director Pratt, and Director Lee be appointed to the Parcel Tax Roll Review Panel, and it'll be scheduled for February 21st at 9 a.m., and that the Chief Financial Officer be appointed collector, and that this recommendation be referred to the January 31st regular board meeting for adoption. Who'd like to make that motion? Moved and seconded? Seconded? All in favor? Perfect. Thank you. Okay, we are at 10 after 12. How much longer do we want to go before we break? We could come back after board if we needed to. I don't know if we're going to get through this.
We're not quite halfway through.
Agenda. Yes, and we still have an in-camera item here. Yes. Okay. The rural grants and aids will take some time. Let's see what else we've got on here. You know what? The rest of it won't take long, right? I think this next one will take some time. The rest of it. Should we keep going? Okay, let's do one more. See how we're doing with that one? Okay, so item number 13. This is on the 2019 Rural Areas Grant and Aid Timeline and Procedures. And I'll took that over to, sorry, 12. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Missed. I checked that off already. Number 12. Joint Report, Corporate Administrative Services, Semi-Annual Report. And this is Tina as well?
Yeah, Chair. So this is just an overview of the last half of 2018 in activities. So the Corporate Services team provides this on a biannual basis. So happy to take any questions if there are any.
Director McMahon?
Oh, sure. I'll start with an easy one. Inactive records retrieval. I'm just wondering how long is inactive, and where do we keep our records when they're inactive?
Staff?
Thank you. Inactive depends on the classification of the records, and we do have an inactive record storage area in the IT building outside this, right across there.
I had an HR question. I've had this for a while, but do we get HR reports here at the board? Because I'd like to know how many employees we have and where they work and, other things generally about the staff. So do we ever receive HR reports like that?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair. The total number of staff is generally contained within the budget, but be happy to include additional information as part of a report. There is a section here about human resources within the annual report. And there'll be I believe it's February 21st, I'll be looking to interact with the board in a lunch and learn session as well about human resources.
Thank you. One more question?
Yes. What is a MySCRD account and why do I want one?
Staff?
Fantastic question. So MySCRD is actually a portal where people can pay some of their utility bills. And also we're looking to expand those services for dog licensing, planning, building permits, etc. It was part of our upgrades to our ERP systems, our our computerized financial systems back in 2017, so it's continuing to evolve, and the uptake is quite significant now. So it's really helped staff with efficiencies with how we collect our fees and charges.
I have one in C Shelf, and I pay my business license through that. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions by directors? Okay, all right. Let's move on to the next. We received all the reports at the beginning. So number 13, this is on the timelines and etc. on grants and aid, which is totally new to this board for many of them. So over to Tina.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this meeting, or this particular report, is to approve the timelines for the rural grant and aid process. So more information will be forthcoming during the budget session. So in round one, we'll do a little deeper dive. But again, one of the key process pieces is, again, the policy. As far as staff have outlined, the procedures that we take in order to evaluate the rural grants and aid. I know there's been some discussion through orientation, et cetera, of how those have been conducted in the past. So again, there's ongoing discussions with that. Again, during budgeting process, the rural areas will be deciding sort of their funding envelopes. So again, we wanted to provide this information prior to budget for next week, but we'll be spending a lot more time. So today's purpose is really just to understand what the current policy is, what the draft procedure is, and to approve the timelines as presented, because there is an element of making sure that the community is prepared, and we have to prepare advertisements to those community groups. So one of the process improvements in the past is to provide a lot more lead time for the groups.
Okay, so I noticed in the recommendation that it just says receive for information. Am I hearing that you would like the directors to approve the timeline as presented?
I think for this time around that would be advisable, please.
Okay. Director McMahon, you're going to make that motion? Or you, okay. Seconder? Any other questions before we move forward? And I'm just going to put this up front. We've looked at the documents for the budget for next week. At the back of the package for day one on Monday is more information on grant and aid. So it gives you what each area has and a little bit more about the process, and we'll be diving more into that then. So this is just laying out the timeline, and that's just so that it fits inside the budget. Okay? Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you very much. Number 14. Long-term debt as at December 31st. And back to Tina.
Yes, Chair. So this report is provided on a regular basis to update the board on its long-term and short-term debt positions. So again, in advance of year-end and our budgeting process, staff are providing this for information.
Any questions? Director Hills.
It's the debt servicing ratio. Just I see 25% is high. I think that's the limit, and so I'm just trying to understand the range that we're dealing with and the significance of the 8.77 as going forward.
Staff?
So the SCRD board endorsed a debt management policy some years ago, and that was in regards to one of the outlines in ongoing work with our financial sustainability. So the regional district is not required to have a debt servicing ratio as member municipalities are supposed to through the community charter. However, the debt management policy adopted had said that we want to stay in line with about a 15% ratio. So that's why we do report on it, to say where is the regional district in relation to its debt management ratio as far as a measurement. So it's like a KPI that we've developed.
Any other questions? All right, let's move on to number 14. This is long-term, that was long-term debt. Next one, revenue anticipation borrowing cost benefit analysis, number 15, pages 125, and back to Tina.
Yeah, so this report, Chair, was requested as the revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw was adopted in December. And the question was, why doesn't the regional district use its reserves funding to do its interim borrowing? So staff have provided a little bit of information as to why we don't do that, and a little bit about the legislative differences between a regional district and a municipality. So again, the crux of the report is we earn more interest in our investments than we do that we have to pay from a short-term borrowing perspective. So
I think from a municipality perspective, I think it's not even that. It's that in the municipality we have an operating budget, we have surpluses, but they're not designated, and so we can move them around, whereas you can't here. If you take them from one to another, you have to actually pay the interest anyway. So you could do it internally, but it's more hassle than what it's worth.
Plus you have to do it by bylaw.
Yeah.
So it's much more complex than a regional district model.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Any other questions about that report? All right, let's move on to number 16. This one's a pretty straightforward one. There were no contracts, right, between 50 and 100,000. So let me just get to the right page in my agenda package. So I don't think there's any questions on this one. All right. Next, director constituency and travel expenses for period ending December 31st. Any questions about this? Nope. Move on to Annex L. This is the Sunshine Coast Tourism request. And did you want to speak to this, Tina? Or are there questions at the table? Director McMahon? Do you want to speak to it first? Just quickly.
Well, I think this was requested as part of pre-budget to provide some preliminary information on the MRDT tax as it relates to the Sunshine Coast Tourism. So again, staff have prepared some information prior to next week's deliberations. We've also requested and prepared the Sunshine Coast Tourism that there are some questions regarding more clarification on affordable housing, etc. So our staff continue to investigate and work with the group on that.
Okay. Questions? Let's start with Director Ties this time.
I did a little bit of research. One is because we're actually an Airbnb host, so I checked that we actually collect the MRDT tax, and apparently we do, but their report is flawed, so I might let them know. And I think here we're collecting 2%, but we, according to province, we can actually choose to up that to 3%, and I'm wondering if that's something that we might want to entertain.
I'll address that one. When the 2%, first when it came out, it was 2%, and Sunshine Coast Tourism was in the process of getting that approved when it was changed provincially to 3%. They would have had to go back and go to all of the different facilities and businesses and et cetera to move to 3%. Given that it was a bit contentious at the time, they chose not to do that. So when it comes back up for renewal, at that point they will be able to revisit and go to 3%. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions on this one? Director McMahon?
I remember that when this first came in, the local governments were under the impression that once the tax came in, they would not have to continue funding Sunshine Coast Tourism, and then discovered it was a matching funds arrangement. I take it that discussion has been sort of laid to rest at this point, or all right?
Yes, that's come back a couple of times, but it's been clarified. Any other questions? Sunshine Coast Tourism. Tina?
Chair, it's not a matching funds. It's up to the discretionary of the local government, but it is a contingent factor of the MRDT is that the local government funding support still continues. What that figure entails, staff have not been able to find any clarification on that. So currently the regional district portions of that is 20,000. So District of Sechelt contributes, Town of Gibson contributes. So yeah.
Director McMahon?
So if they did in future request 3%, that would not necessarily mean that our contributions would have to go up proportionally?
No, we could stay the same. We just cannot reduce. Okay. Any other questions? Director Lee?
Yeah.
Oh, let's try Director Lee over there.
Yes, it talks about using some of the tax money for affordable housing. I'm not exactly. I got two questions. Has Sunshine Coast Tourism proposed anything like that to start getting into affordable housing? And what does it mean to get into affordable housing? Does it mean you build some affordable housing, or you convert some of your units to affordable housing, or what the heck does it mean?
Do you want to address it or want me to address it?
I'd love to address it. Having
Okay.
spent 8 years in the tourism industry, what I can tell you is that we have a very cyclical nature of tourism on the coast, and a number of the businesses only have core staff that actually lives here all year round. A number of staff that are coming from other areas. They might be coming from university or colleges, or even, for example, you might have highly trained chefs that are only coming for a short period in the season. And typically tourism jobs are not well paid. They're at the lower end, just above minimum wage or at minimum wage. So bringing in affordable housing would help to address a lot of the labor shortages that we have in this market.
So I'm going to address the other part about Sunshine Coast Tourism actually getting into affordable housing. They would have to actually put together a proposal and apply to be able to use some of the funds that are collected under the MRDT towards that. There's two avenues they can use. The application is actually in the package that we have here, so you can go through that. And we've asked that when they come to present in front of us next week that they address that. They have not currently put anything forward to use funds for affordable housing.
Yes, in my previous life on the chamber, the employers are, as Laurie says, Director Pratt, they're very concerned about getting affordable housing for their staff, and it's short-term, summertime.
Right. One of the things that is happening in the community is a number of community groups have gotten together, and it will be coming forward with a presentation to the community around workforce housing. That will be coming, and so that's another reason why we'd like to hear from Sunshine Coast Tourism to connect them all together. Okay? Thank you. Any other questions? Director Beamish.
Yes, is it possible if we look in the future, if we were to look at increasing this to the 3%, that the 1% could go to affordable housing and 2% could go to the current purpose?
We would need to make a good case to them because they're the ones who have to do it.
Right, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Number 19, this is on the Seashell Public Library, and this is for information only. Are there any questions at this point, or would you like to talk to the librarians with this information next week when they come in front of us? Director McMahon.
Yeah, I just had one general question. It noted that in July 2017, a meeting was held with the library board and staff, SCRD, etc., but negotiations did not lead to a draft agreement. And then in October 2018, all the parties met again and still don't seem to have gotten to an agreement. So just in a very general sense, I was wondering what the stumbling blocks here are.
I think the first one was that our librarian in Seashell left, and the new librarian came in, and it took a bit of time for her to get up to speed, and then staff started working with them. Director Lee?
Yes, when I read through this, I noticed, I forget the exact date, it was one of the J ones. We were supposed to start negotiating another long-term funding agreement.
In July.
July. And I was curious if that ever did occur.
Yes, the meeting happened. That was shortly after the new librarian started. So she didn't have enough of background information to actually move anything forward at that time. But it did happen.
Okay. So it actually didn't, negotiations didn't start.
That's
we
right.
weren't involved then. Okay. Because instead of negotiating an agreement, we got presented with a funding plan. So it's kind of different.
Okay. Any other questions?
So how did you say we were going to go forward with this?
The librarian will be here. They'll be presenting in front of us next week, so we'll be able to ask questions, et cetera, at that point. And it will be the recommendations for funding are coming forward in our budget packages. So at that point, you'll be making decisions about what will be funded. So this is for background information to help inform your decision making next week. Any other questions? Does that make sense?
Yes, it's getting too late to do much else for this year, isn't it? So we need to make a decision soon.
Yes.
We'll be making a decision on incomplete information, but what the heck, we're good at that.
I think that the negotiation, like the MOU, will be negotiated down the road, and then that could be probably retroactive at that point, right? So we'll be doing some budget information based on previous information brought forward. Okay. Yes, Director Hiltz.
Yeah, a question for staff. It's how when the library service bylaw, I'm going to take Egmont as an example, which bylaw 1086 is adopted in 2018, and the funding contribution is 4 cents per 100,000. How is that level of service first determined? Like, why 4 cents, not 33 cents? Like, how does that happen?
So when the service is first being contemplated, so staff would provide a report as to what certain taxation limits, what type of funding that would generate, and that's approved by the board at that particular time. So, yeah.
So a follow-up, so there would be a report on bylaw 1066, which talked about the recommendation for 4 cents per 100,000.
Yes.
Is that easy to find on the website, do you know, or?
Thank you. It should be. If not, I can certainly direct you to the right agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just letting them know that I was supposed to be on a call at 12:30, so I'm late. It's fine. Okay, any other questions about the library at this point? Okay, let's look at the correspondence, because there are a couple of things in the correspondence that we need to give staff direction on. The first one is call for written submissions with regards to the Select Standing Committee on Crown Corporation. Now, deadline for this is February 1st for feedback. Yes? So I'll tell you what we did in Sechelt. Councillor McLean is involved in the car share piece, so we had him actually put some information together and submitted that on behalf of the district. So that was for the Sunshine Coast. So if you'd like anything further.
Could you share that, please?
I could do that.
Thank
I don't
you.
have it right here, but I could do that, yes. Okay. Anything else you want to do with this one? Let's look at the next one. This is the Sunshine Coast Seniors Planning Table. There's two pieces to this. One is with regards to appointing a liaison to the planning table. And the second is to decide if we want to discuss funding, and if so, then to refer the request to the February 5th meeting for a decision. So first, let's look at the liaison. District of Sechelt does have a liaison, and so does Town of Gibson's has a liaison at this table. They've been in operation for probably about 4 years now, and it is, or more, yeah. They had funding from under the Status of Women grant to come together and do some work, and they bring together all the organizations up and down the coast that deal with seniors in whatever form. So is there anybody on the board here who would like to sit on the Sunshine Coast Seniors Planning Table as a liaison? Matt McLean is our representative. He's 27.
That's the right guy.
No appetite?
I'm not going to volunteer to be on it because I'm a little overwhelmed
Yes.
right now. But I do think this is an important community organization that the SCRD be a part of.
I found I was the liaison previously, and I found that it was actually a really good connection, because at the table you have Vancouver Coastal Health, you have provincial and federal, you have everything from Better at Home, SCRD, the Town of Gibson's, District of Sechelt, and really every organization, Happy Feet, like just every organization that is dealing with seniors, nurse at home, they're all at the table. Yeah.
I sit, or have, I've resigned, but I used to sit on the steering committee for the seniors planning table, and I've been on a lot of boards and involved in a lot of things, and this committee, let me tell you, is actually one where action items happen and things move forward. And the really cool thing about this committee is it's being looked at by a lot of other communities in Canada. It's really been put up there as a template of how community can work together to identify priorities for in this case, seniors, and move things forward. So I don't know if an alternate can sit as a member, but I would be happy to if that's allowed through the chair to Angie. I'm not sure.
I'll put another piece in around that too, is because of the model, our MP actually took it to Ottawa, and within the next month or two, the minister in charge of seniors in the country is actually coming here to meet with this group because of the work that's being done. So is there anybody like to put their name forward?
What kind of a commitment are we talking about?
Once every couple months.
Once every couple months?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was just going to suggest Director McMahon and I could do it as a share, but if you wanted to do it with Director McMahon
or if you wanted to take it for a year and then we could take it, or
yeah.
I haven't volunteered for all that much, so I guess I could do one.
Okay, Director Lee. Yes. So motion that Director Lee be appointed as liaison for the Sunshine Coast Seniors Planning Table.
And take it to this afternoon's board meeting. Might as well just get it
So
done.
we have second and
Add more to the board meeting.
Okay. All those in favor? Thank you. And then what about funding? So the next request is for funding. So this would just be to refer this to February 5th meeting for a decision. And this is also, they've also made a request to the District of Sechelt. What they're looking at doing is taking these funds together and having a coordinator. The request last year, the District of Sechelt provided $20,000 on our own to help them with some funds to move forward, and they're coming out to all of the municipalities and the governments for funding to consolidate, to have somebody to coordinate this. So is there an appetite to move this to the February 5th budget discussion meeting? Question?
yeah, I just sort of a process question. So this is a request for ongoing funding, which would be different than going through the grant and aid channel.
Through staff. How would we deal with this?
Yes, and legislatively, to fund an ongoing program, theoretically would require establishing a new service, so we would have to contemplate that, but that could all be part of, if the board was wanting to review what that would look like, staff could provide a report.
Yeah, when we did it last year, we did it as a one-time last year. Director Hiltz?
So to staff, our training says you're thinking about what pot of money is this going to come out of? So what kind of, there's a grant and aid pot, there's the new service pot, what other kinds of pots are there?
Yes, Chair. So it depends what's being contemplated. In the past, we have funded it through grant and aid. So if it's ongoing funding, that would be a decision of the board, would be how they could do that. There could be a stopgap measure, meaning as we move towards something else, we could do this. So there's a lot of options, and what pots of money, et cetera. So all of those would need to be contemplated.
So you're saying we could do grant and aid for the first year, and if it was looking to be ongoing, we could look at setting up a service area.
We could. That would be some of the contemplation that we'd want to have during budget.
Yes. Yeah. That's next week. Okay. Director Beamish?
Yeah, I don't have any background on this, but we had this on our agenda last week as well. And for whatever reason, through the liaison appointee, Councilor D'Andrade, they asked to be taken off the agenda. So I don't know if they're rethinking the request or what. So we did not consider it last week at council.
So we'll have to follow up with them because they requested that we put it forward. Yeah. Okay. Any appetite to move this to next week at this point? Director Bassan?
Yeah, process question again. So are we asking staff to report back on our options for budget, or?
Well, it would be refer it to the February 5th meeting, which is the budget meeting.
Okay.
With options.
Right.
For funding. Okay. Director Hiltz?
The question is staff capacity, right? This is another thing.
Staff?
Thank you. I think the recommendation is just to refer this exact request for more discussion on February the 5th. Okay. And it'll give a staff enough time to come back so that there's a discussion at that time. That was what we believe would be happening.
Yeah. Okay. So motion's on the floor. Second? Is somebody to second that at this point? I think you made the motion, so you can't second it. Director Ty's second. And this. 2 hands. All those in favor? Thank you. Final one is number 22. It's a request for a letter of support from the Sunshine Coast Botanical Society. That was late, yes. We have checked to ensure that the letter will still be applicable and they can still use it on the other end. And staff?
Thank you. So certainly this is a grant that the regional district is familiar with. So I understand the grant has been submitted and that we can, following the board direction, submit a letter of support. So following our processes, letters of support from the regional district are always approved by the board for external grant applications.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion? Comment? Yeah.
If staff is happy with it, then that's fine. The letter was a little thin on detail for somebody who was coming into this new. It doesn't say how much the grant is for or exactly what it's going to be used for, so just saying.
Okay. Any other comments? Questions? Someone like to make a motion that we provide a letter of support for the Sunshine Coast Botanical Gardens? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And then the final item, we've received all the other letters that are on there. The final item is an acknowledgement. And this is to our financial staff and the other staff who support them in the district, that they have been awarded the Canadian Award for Financial Reporting for SCRD Annual Report. So congratulations on behalf of the board and the community. So we have a motion next. Sorry, Director Beamish?
Chair, number 23, item 23, how do we propose to do that? Or are we waiting for that to come back next time?
That would be part of the dry ice and report that's coming forward.
Because they are obviously anticipating a decision so that they can move forward with their planning.
I think, so General Manager Hall would be responding to them because at this point we've said ice till the end of April, and they are going to be in May. So he said he was going to be He's going to be following up with all of the user groups.
Okay.
So they would be.
Just don't want that overlooked.
That's right. Okay, so we have, what's the board's wishes here? We have, it is almost 1:45. We have in-camera to do on this as well. Do we want to do that after the board meeting? You want to do it now? Okay. So let's pass the motion to move in camera. We'll take questions, and then we'll dismiss the group and move in. So it's a motion that the public be excluded from attendance, meeting in accordance with Section 91G and K. Who would like to make that motion? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Questions from the audience? Sophie. Yes? Yes? Why? Would you like to explain that?
Sure.
Or yeah?
I've been on the board of minor hockey for 9 out of the last 11 years, and have had many, many, many conversations on this topic. So I think, it's pretty clear what I'd be advocating for. So hence the recuse.
Okay.
Conflict of interest, yeah.
Yes? If you go back to the previous report, which is actually in the package, right, in the amended agenda, it gives what the cost was if we were to go forward with all streams. At this point, we don't have a number for the rest. And that's part of what staff will be bringing back. Okay? All right. Any questions from you? You've been waiting to speak to us.
What I wanted to say
Thank you. Good.
Quick question. Is GM Hall aware of your date envelopes that you would like as the Minor Hockey Association?
The dates that Kate provided there has been our request. So we've been
Okay.
clear and consistent in our requests, and I want to make sure I will redoubly still send him emails, but
Yeah, I've just requested that he email all of us with his, so that comes in.
Okay.
This conversation and Ian to make sure that that's a piece that's come forward.
Thanks for letting me stick around and speak. I really felt like I had to represent the membership that was showing here today,
Yeah.
and to put that forward, because I hate to have that be presented that way when really that's not at all the way that we've been asking. And to your question, we've been clear and consistent in what we see that the plan, what the community is seeking.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And did you have something to say?
Yes.
Okay.
I do have a question.
Okay.
My name is Scott Davis.
Yes.
Some of you may have heard of me. I was advisory planning committee for Town of Gibson's and for 6 years.
Yes.
Seashell.
Yes.
Tremendous honor. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
I wanted to bring to your attention, because you're all basically new directors here, we're in a new year, that one of your infrastructures is really in peril. It's daycare.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if you've got a handle on it.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you because I know. No, so I'm working with the YMCA. There's one of the groups. There's also, because they've applied for some provincial funding. They've applied for some additional funding under the new program. Okay, so I'll just tell you another piece too, and you can take this out of what you're saying. Gibson, Seashell, and the regional district have recently just applied for a grant to look at what is required with regards to daycare on the Sunshine Coast. We know there's a huge need. We don't know exactly what the need is. This will help inform what that is so that we can actually fulfill that. So then, do your piece.
1997, I've been aware of it, but nobody's ever asked me for my information.
Call Marina.
We run a family child care.
Yes.
Okay? And that's the one that's closing the fastest.
Mhm.
That's the group that never hasn't been supported well. And when we moved here in 97, there was over 60. We're down to about 16. The number is huge. And if you're expecting your communities to thrive and grow, it's not going to happen if you don't have child care. And so this is a serious problem. The canary is going off in the mine shaft and nobody's noticing it. Okay? Your community services is managing CCR&Rs. You have one in each of your districts, but they're very ineffective. Okay? This if you try to run this as a business, you have to come in with a lot of money. You have to come in and buy a house, and you can't do that in affordable housing. You can't do it in an apartment or a mobile home. You're highly regulated, and yet your income is also really controlled.
Yes.
Okay, and the amount of support you get is getting worse and worse. So I'm really wanting to bring this to your attention. I've been wanting to for several years, but in previous groups, I'm noticing that there's a lack of listening. I hope that you folks all are listening, that this is really a big thing. And if you are studying it, don't just study the large groups like the YMCA.
No.
Go all the way down to the mom and pops.
Yes.
We're getting gray hair now, and we're retiring soon, and nobody's taking our positions.
Okay.
Nobody wants our jobs.
So Scott, do you know Marina in the district of Seashell?
I do.
She's the one who's going to be heading up the group. No, the whole thing, right? Because we've applied for it, so she's responsible for that. Others have come forward already with, your kinds of comments, etc. And I'm directing them to her because as soon as they get started, they want to capture all that information and put that in.
But I need you folks to think broader on this subject because
It's huge.
It is huge, and if it's not being managed, if it's not even being taken care of at all, you're going nowhere. We're a very dependent community. It's been harder here than it is in other areas to do child care.
Yes.
So thank you. I know you're all busy. I'm sorry to leave with that.
Totally. We at the District of Seashell, we've had staff go off on maternity leave and not be able to come back to work because they haven't got daycare. I hear about it every week. Yes, I think it's on all of our radar. Thank you for bringing that forward. Okay, so we'll ask the three of you to leave, and we're going to do our final piece. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So I know that our tummies are probably rolling here as well, but what happens in the background is staff actually have to turn around the amended agenda for the board.
Yes.
So
we have one item, though, I think, on this agenda.
Perfect.
Yes, thanks. Isn't this the one? That's not this one. That's the board one. This is the other one.